He said that Russ was running this, so we just blame Outhouse because he's not going to be here anyway. So
who's the only confirmed guy not turning up? So all right, I'm just hitting the live button and sharing it. So
perfect. So we got to be on our best behavior. Let me straighten my tie up. I get the throwback. Today with the Grays groupies.
I have that shirt.
Yeah, Grayson, Ryan McDowell's son. Yep. That's the only thing I own now are fantasy football shirts at this point.
I got a little Wubba Lubba Chub Chub.
Nice Wubba Lubba Chub Chub.
It might be my favorite shirt. It's just so comfortable.
Oh, it's fantastic.
All of them really are comfortable.
Yep.
My DGN shirt, my Crossroads shirt, my Dummies, the Blitz shirt. They're all great.
It is. It's funny. Like that's literally all I wear for t-shirts at this point.
They are remarkable.
Fantasy football. And I did break down and I bought the Green Grinches, the inaugural champion of the XBL, the Extreme Beanbag League that Scott Fish's son did. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the best shirts I own, but the only ones I don't buy in a pack for like $10. So that's probably, not really saying much. Yeah, I was telling Zach, I put my shirt on the minute I got home from work, like 4 hours early. Like I didn't want to forget it. I've been a little too excited, I think, for this thing. I don't know why. It's a podcast, but like
professional, Pete. You look all professional with the.
Do I? Wow, thank you. Yeah, I've moved to the room with the bookshelf.
Hey, Tom.
What's going on? Y'all just said Pete looked professional, so I had to make sure to get the quality down just a little.
And he's gone. Okay.
What's happening, guys? I'm super happy to talk to you.
Yep. I have no plan. My plan actually initially was to like have Jake on, do a 15-minute thing so he could leave because I didn't know how much he was going to want to be here. Since, he already quit on me once. And then, hope one of you guys had something interesting to say. But I've just given that up. We're now live. This is Dynasty Crossroads live event. Have fun, guys. Let me know how it goes, I guess. I don't...
Peter, all you've got to do to make Jake love you is swaddle yourself in baby clothing and pretend like you're a child. And then maybe at that point, you'll actually get him to pay more attention to you.
This went to a weird place very quickly. I'm happy. Yeah. I'm drinking for the first time in 3 years, I think, and first time ever on a podcast because I figure as long if it's a complete mess, at least I can make an ass of myself and people will enjoy that. So that's my plan.
That's fair.
This is the second time.
Appreciate
the second time for me that I've been on a podcast where the host, it was the first time that he was drinking and going to host the show. So the first one went exceptionally well. So
it's not like I was drinking the other night. I went on. I don't know if you know him, Roto Lounge.
Yep.
He's trying to make content. He's a film guy, so we don't get on. But no, he asked me to come on his podcast, and it's a lounge, so he drinks pretty much constantly. So I was like, all right, I drink. He asked me the best question. Actually, he's like, "Are you a social drinker?" And I realized I'm only a social drinker. I literally don't even think about drinking unless like someone else is drinking. I'm like, all right, yeah, sure, I have a drink. I remember I remember when that used to be fun. People used to think I was fun back then. It's probably the alcohol. We have someone else. That's Spaceman himself, right?
Hey, look who it is. Hey, guys.
What's going on, man?
Not much. Excited to do this. It's a Friday night. This isn't where it's at.
Apparently. This is your only option. Let's be honest. You know what? I had other plans, but I made special arrangements.
Oh, man. I can already tell this group's going to be a fun one.
The Crossroads social distancing special. We're each standing on opposite sides of the crossroad, just yelling things about J.K. Dobbins across the way.
Hey, man, I'm fairly certain I'm on the other side of the country, so I'm the best social distancer of all of you.
I mean, I live in a state where there are like 9 people, so I'm pretty socially distant at this point. But
and people go to Maine to build bunkers.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I'm just ignoring. Like I'm meant to be doing. I'm gonna bash you all out and talk to Jake for a second and like try and do the start of a show, and then we can devolve into chaos. That sound all right, guys?
Chaos sounds great.
Chaos is where I live. All right, just don't go anywhere. Like I'll be lonely and shit. Hang on. There we go. Jake, are you still here?
If you can hear me.
Yeah, there you go. Welcome back to Dynasty Crossroads. This is our first ever attempt at a live event. My name's P.A. Howard. On Twitter, Peter Howard in real life. I am already off the rails. How you doing, Jake?
I'm doing good, man. It feels weird being back, seeing your face, you know. It feels like it was quite a while ago we were doing this on a weekly basis. But 100th episode, that's I don't know, what did we do? Maybe half of those together? And you've been just banging out episodes.
I have gone a little insane and started doing multi-week episodes just because
9-10 months. It's been that long, right? It's been since my son was about born, hasn't it?
Pretty much. Yeah, he was
almost a year already, which is in one way it's kind of crazy that it's been that long, but in another way it does feel like it's been a long time since I've done this. But you know what? I'm happy to be here. I had to find all my podcast equipment, so
which is just sad, man. I've missed you here, man.
No, I miss you too,
and yeah,
man.
we're past 100 episodes. I don't know how I got there basically by you not being around, so I don't know when to shut up. So all our episodes went to 3 hours long. So I started doing multi-show episodes, and then we got to 100 real quickly, or within 9 months at least. So I appreciate you coming back on for the 100th. I guess we're actually past the 100th episode, to be perfectly honest. I think we're on 104 now, but that's when I noticed. So
we're on 127, but I want to have you know what? I didn't realize that we passed that 100. So let's celebrate now.
Let's go back and pretend I didn't completely screw that up. I know, man. Is there anything about this year's draft you want to share other than your deep and abiding hatred for CD Lamb?
Yeah, that's about it. And honestly, I feel out of the loop, to be honest. I haven't done nearly as much film evaluation as I usually do. And part of that feels great. And part of that makes me feel a little bit insecure with talking at least about in depth about these guys. Like I've watched a couple games of a lot of these guys, but I definitely haven't, dove deep to these guys. So, you know what? It feels a little bit uncomfortable for me.
That's fair enough. Do you have anyone at all that stands out in that you don't understand why people like them or why people don't? Anyone at all that stands out a little bit that way?
I think I've been a little bit. I mean, I like Jonathan Taylor a lot. I think he's really good. I think he's definitely getting some hype around there that I think is a little bit overboard.
Right. The Saquon Barkley comp.
Yeah, that drives me a little bit crazy because maybe as a runner he could be that good, but Barkley is on another level as far as just a weapon in an offense, and I don't think he's going to bring that passing game threat that I think some people are thinking that he will. But we'll see. I mean, we've been surprised before, so I don't want to bash Jonathan Taylor because I do think he's a hell of a prospect. But I do think we have to understand what his floor and ceiling is, and he definitely has the best combination of those two things as far as high floor and good ceiling. Not the highest of all, but he's probably the safest prospect as far as running back, wide receiver in this class.
Cool. No, I don't think he can catch the ball. I think he can't physically isn't capable of. No, I think he's easily the running back one. I'm sorry, this is the first time I'm ever recording in this room, apart from the announcement message, and I just realized, I built the desk, so it's obviously a foot too tall, and the only way I can actually reach my desk is by sitting on 3 pillows. Not joking, 6'2" man sitting on 3 pillows. And I've just noticed I'm a fidgeter apparently, so I keep swinging back and forward and trying to readjust myself. So
I gotta go get. I have to go get a pen to just.
He can-
my pen the whole time.
I've become so much more professional, Jake. No, it's great to have you back on, man.
it's good
And
to
talk a
be
little Jonathan Taylor. Like people still mention every now and again, who's this Jake guy you keep referring to? And it really upsets me. Like every time someone reminds me how long it's been without you. Like we started a podcast together, and you abandoned me in the middle of it. And I'm just trying to keep the lights on. There's some dim light in the back of my head. It's like Jake will come back one day. Hey, Alex, I see you commented on YouTube there. How you doing, dude? But yeah, we've invited a whole bunch of other people on, and true to form, I organized it not at all. I just put them all in the group chat, and some of them have joined. So is there anyone you want to bring on, Jake, to talk to? We got Zach.
I think
we got Eden.
I think we should just bring them all in at the same time.
No problem. Let me, I guess, mention who's on here. We've got the most repeated guest on the Dynasty Crossroads, I'm pretty sure, which is Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies podcast at Assassin13 on Twitter. And you've got Eaton from the Dynasty Diagnostic podcast. Yeah, the Eaton wasn't ready at all. He's like, man, I was just looking something up on my phone. Caught you. And we've got the FS Spaceman, the man trying to replace my database with one of his own, which is much better and much more fancy and good looking. How you doing, guys?
Fantastic. This is Royal Rumble style. I love it. The first one to get thrown out over the top rope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like it.
Music there. That was quite impressive. Just one by one introductions with the video.
You're right. I especially like the fact we're allowed 6 in here. And I
walked away.
I like the way we can have 6 in here, and I was worried we wouldn't have enough room for everyone because I've invited like 50 people, and we only have 5. So I think we're okay. I don't think anyone's coming. So settle in, Jake. That 15 minutes I told you it will be restricted to might actually be the whole 3-hour session. How's social distancing going for you guys? You enjoying it as much as me, or?
I mean, I'm still working, so it's kind of strange, to be honest, for me. But you know, it's a toll on my wife, I can tell, because she's working from home. She's doing homeschooling with our almost 6-year-old daughter, and our daycare just closed for 2 weeks for our 10-month-old son. So she has her handful. You know, we had to hire a babysitter a couple days a week just so she could get anything accomplished at home. But it's definitely intense, because it's intense for her and it's intense for me, because I'm going to work and then I'm going home, and it's great to spend time with your family and your kids, and I love most of it. But there are definitely some times of frustration, and it's just being a little bit overwhelmed with the repetitiveness of everything.
Jake, you're among friends here. You can let the guard down. You can drop that. I have been home since the 13th of March. I haven't been to work. My wife hasn't been to work. The kids haven't been to school. It is madness. Like,
I didn't want to be like that.
I know. I'm starting to think, guys, that these wives of yours could really help with another adult in the house. Could maybe help out. Maybe like if they had another fully grown person in the house who could take care of the kids or do some of the homeschooling while they're working. I don't know. Just a thought. Are you too marveling at your wife doing everything while you sit here on a fantasy football podcast, or?
It's nonstop. She doesn't ever stop.
They really don't, actually. It's the same over here. I do nothing. My wife's doing everything.
But I do think she would.
Good deal.
As much as I think it probably drives her crazy, I don't know if she'd have it any other way. Because as soon as I would do it, I'd be doing it wrong, and then she would just have to do it.
Okay, you see, this is why we have professionals on here. J Mike just pointed out he is actually in here. I just haven't clicked his little pretty little face down here. I didn't know there was a scroll. I didn't know that. Hey, J Mike.
Finally, we have a host.
Hola, hola,
Yeah,
hola. Arriba.
J Mike Check from the Open Bar podcast. Also, every Dynasty Dummies podcast, if I'm not mistaken. I seem to hear him on every podcast everywhere. I'm rightly so. How you doing? We're discussing how we are mostly watching our wives work really hard during social quarantine. and wondering
I'm
if we
fitting
could
right
get
in.
some help. Yeah, right.
I'm fitting right in then, basically, because I am.
I don't think his audio's on.
Can you hear me?
I
can
got
hear
you.
Yeah. So essentially, I am working from home, which is pretty fantastic to be able to do right now. I'm grateful for that opportunity. But my wife is the real superhero of our home. She is holding everything together by being able to work from home, as well as teach our children, as well as make sure they have outside time and make sure that everybody's fed and everybody's good. And I am just complaining in my brain at the end of my days because I'm stressed about work. I'm like, what are we doing? What am I doing with my life? I'm married to a superhero and I did not even know it. I appreciate her more and more even now, but the confetti is showering down. Jake Anderson's here. The reunion of the Crossroads is back. And I'm just happy to be amongst friends. This is a good time.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of private messages from you guys saying you can't hear each other, but I can hear everyone, so I'm kind of good. Figure that out, I guess.
I think it's just up to us to figure it out.
I don't know why it will be.
Peter, you're just gonna have to just repeat what each person said.
You just gotta translate.
Basically, we're all saying the same thing. We are enjoying watching our wives doing all the work and wondering if we couldn't get some more adults in the house to maybe help him out with it.
I'm in the same boat, honestly. I mean, luckily I don't have children. I do have 2 dogs. I consider them children because they just take up too much time, at least for my girlfriend. But yeah, I've been home for a couple of weeks now. My girlfriend is working from home. I unfortunately don't have the opportunity to do that. But she has been just 12 hours a day. She runs a Sylvan Center. She runs a tutoring center, and she's usually big boss lady, and now she's at the point where she is pretty much every day doing online tutoring sessions one-on-one for each kid, and she's about to pull her hair out, and I'm afraid I'm next. So honestly, at this point, I'm kind of looking for a way out. I'm looking for somewhere I can go to that might be safer than here.
Keep talking, guys. I got nothing. Keep it rolling. No, I may have mentioned at one point a rookie mock draft because some of the more professional minded in our group DM here were like, "Are we doing a mock draft?" So I must have mentioned that at some point. So if anyone wants to do that, we can do that. That's all I got.
I can mock draft. We'll do. This will be perfect because Jake can't hear anything. We'll do the mock draft, and we'll do it. Jake will be a blind choice mock draft.
No, we'll draw signs and just put them on the screen.
Hasn't been taken.
You'll be that guy, right?
Just taken right in front of me.
No, I think actually we should do a mock draft of favorite players because that's what I've been asking everyone that comes on. By the way, Chris Allen from I forget which podcast he's on right now.
Everywhere.
Basically Chris Allen. If you don't know Chris Allen, you're not doing it right. So I don't need to mention it early. But he says you're looking swole. I thought I could mention that. Out here making us all look bad.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take that for now. But that's entirely not true.
Yeah. But
honestly, I'm just trying to cool down.
I think we just know what Eitan's been doing during this quarantine. He's been bringing sexy back. So working on that summer body.
Exercise is exercise. So
I'm taking the over on the 2,400 push-ups for Eitan though in the 12 hours.
I would say on 12 push-ups. That's what I would do.
No, but the question I've been asking everyone that I can con into coming onto the Crossroads with that Jake, I just tell them he's still there, and then they find out when they turn up. It's been really awkward. But who's your favorite player? And remarkably, very few people name the same player. So, I was thinking a mock draft with that kind of a theme. Not who you would take one or two. I mean, who cares? But who are you really gunning for around whatever ADP they may have? I think Jake is just CD Lamb, so it might not have to.
As long as I get that selection, then I'm good.
Pretty much, okay. I still know Jake. That's cool. Anyone else got one? Whatever their ADP is, you're trading up or down in that range if you just have to have someone?
I mean, J. Mike and I are going to fight over Justin Jefferson. You know that. I'll be the gentleman. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 2, without a doubt.
How high would you take him? Let's do an auction here. Who's going to give up first? Anyone taking him at the 101?
No.
Not the 101. Are we talking about a Superflex league or a non-Superflex backwards league?
Superflex. Let's really up the stakes here.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if it's 101, but I mean, if you're asking me if I'm going to take him at 104, especially on a team where I have young running backs,
don't skip ahead on me here. You can't just name your price. Someone else gets the chance to take him before we get to 104. Okay, anyone going for 102? Justin Jefferson, Superflex League, tight end premium.
Can't do it. No.
J. Mike, you got a chance to claim Justin Jefferson. Truth I heard right here.
Not gonna be able to do it.
No, Spaceman. No.
I
don't. You can't hear us, so that's cool.
I just moved him up
for a second.
I just moved him up to the my tier 1 of wide receivers, if that counts. So,
well, we'll find out what that tier 1 really means. Yeah. 103. Who's going to take him?
I still can't do it.
Still not doing it.
No.
J. Mike, man, no one's got the guts. Eaton, here's your shot. Are you taking him at 104? Are you going to claim Justin Jefferson? Truth or
again? I
Is
would
he your
have
guy?
I
Is
would
he your
have
guy
to
at 104? No, none of this giving me the perfect podcast answer. Are you going to take him before anyone else? No, you're not, are you?
I'm not going to do it. I can't do it, I guess.
Dave.
No. I'm going to be out. I'm probably the last one to take him, unfortunately.
Well, tier 1 doesn't mean much to you, does it? I guess now we know. Now we know what Spaceman's tier 1 was. I'm just going to bring the hush. All right, guys, 105. Who's taking Justin Jefferson?
Still not there in a Superflex. Still not there.
Warmer.
First person owns Justin Jefferson. I'm just saying, guys.
Now we're just hovering over the button.
I know.
It's like Jeopardy. You got to wait for the question to be asked, but be the first one to hit it. Because if you go too fast, you got that 2-second delay where you can't buzz it in.
You're risking not being able to say that he's your guy when he hits. You'll be like, no, sorry, you weren't the guy who told everyone about him. It wasn't you. He's going to take that honor.
Yeah, forget caping him for the last 3 months. If you don't take him now at 105, nothing else matters. That's the Peter Howard I know.
Since the true host of the show has spoken, 105, who's doing it?
I can't do it at 105.
God, man, you guys hate Justin Jefferson.
I'm evaluating.
I'd rather have a quarterback or a running back than my favorite wide receiver in the world. Got it. 106.
Gotcha. I'll take
him at 106.
Oh, no. I told you, man. You're going to risk it.
It's too quick.
Reflexes like a cat. Reflexes like a cat. Yeah, I think that once you get those top 2 running backs and CeeDee Lamb off the board with those first 2 quarterbacks, for me, I can see taking Justin Jefferson. Now, There's still landing spot questions. There's still J.K. Dobbins. There's still Cam Akers. There's still Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's still Jerry Jeudy in that mix, but I can definitely see taking Justin Jefferson at 106 in a Superflex.
Just a quick break here from the festivities. Jake just left. He's just not in the draft. He's like,
he's done.
I'm out. Oh, wait, he popped back in to say I would have taken him there.
You got to go 105.
I was actually saying 105.
And say I would have taken 105, and I'll scoot back out of here.
No, I do think that it is a really interesting pivot point because obviously since the combine, his stock has skyrocketed, right? And he's been someone that even for the people who have been on him for a while, now all of a sudden the boat's a little bit more crowded. So the question does become, how high are you willing to take him if you like him as much as many say that they do? And I think that mid-first, for me, mid-first is about right because in Aton and I are in a league together. We're in a few leagues together, but specifically Trade Addict 6. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm sitting at 107. and there's no question about who the pick is going to be.
I got a trade offer for you, J Mike.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
I actually do think it's an interesting way of thinking about it because everyone's going to. It's what we do at this time of year. Like, yeah, I like Jonathan Taylor. He's a running back one, but are you really willing to reach for him over someone else? Really becomes a question to hold people's feet to the fire. Like, are you going to trade up 102 to get him over this guy? Because I do it too. It's just way too much couching. Yeah, I like CD Lamb, but honestly, I'm not trading into the top 3 if I need to get him. I don't see a lot of top 12 upside at the wide receiver position. That's not everything, but is anyone going to put a top 12 upside on, like, let's go through the ADP. What is it? Jake probably will say yes on CD Lamb. He'd say top 12, right?
I think that's definitely in the range of outcomes.
If anybody's going to be top 12, it's going to be CD Lamb.
Eden, seriously. No, seriously, I've had a lot of guests on, and Jake's honestly the first one to ever, sack up and say, yeah, top 12 for CD Lamb. That's why he was the best Dynasty Crossroads host ever, obviously. But moving on, who else in this class, wide receiver, are you willing to actually, reach up, take over those ADP, make sure you get him, someone else doesn't at wide receiver because you think he has top 12 upside? Anyone got anyone?
That's the only other one. Justin Jefferson. For me, Justin Jefferson is that guy. Justin Jefferson has the ability against the zone that I saw, and we talked about this when I was on for 17 hours in a row the last time I was on here. But has that ability that I saw with Juju Smith-Schuster, and it's not a comp, they're different players, but against the zone, to find those spots in a zone. And that is one of the things that I love in a wide receiver, especially a guy who is going to come out of the slot and probably get a little less attention and be able to operate over the middle of the field. I really like that profile. It's the Jarvis Landry, like that type of player. And everyone tells me Jarvis Landry isn't a wide receiver one, but he's been a wide receiver one more than he hasn't been in his career.
More than most players people will take over him. He's like in the 30s in ADP right now.
Yeah.
Well, I think Jefferson kind of has that same issue where he's not, for whatever reason, he doesn't come across as a sexy prospect.
And
so I think
those are my guys.
I think you're going to get him at the end of the first. I think you're going to get him at 110 or so. I don't think you're going to have to take him in the middle of the first, especially in Superflex.
He's really climbing right now, though.
I think really 4 or 5 running backs go, and I think those other 2 wide receivers go ahead of him. So, I mean, I think you're looking at 110 or so, if not possibly later, depending on your draft.
I think the combine has definitely made him a sexier pick, has definitely made Justin Jefferson a sexier pick. And I think that's even why we're having this conversation right now, just because people didn't think he was going to test the way that he did test. But yeah, like Jarvis Landry with juice, I think is the potential upside of Justin Jefferson. And I don't think putting him at wide receiver 2 overall over Henry Ruggs or Judy is really a bridge too far at all. I think that tells you a lot about this class as a whole.
It's really funny, though, you say that, because when I put out my rankings pre-combine back in whatever it was, January, when we were talking about all these players on the dummies, and I listed Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 2, I got some serious pushback from people. People like, you have to be crazy. You get people saying, well, if you got Justin Jefferson in your top 10, I don't think I can listen to you as a fantasy analyst. And so, well, I heard the same thing about people telling me that AJ Brown, last year when I had AJ Brown as wide receiver 1, people said the same thing. Like, I'm not doing this for, a hot take. I'm not doing it for clicks. It doesn't matter. I'm not getting paid to do this. So this is what I see. And so, like, Justin Jefferson, man, has been there for me through this whole process. Peter is just dying laughing. It's great.
No, my leg decided now's the perfect time to have like one of the worst cramps I've ever had in my life. It's like, hey, you know that thing that happens sometimes? It's happening. Is AJ Brown the wide receiver 1 from last year's class? That's something that, like, this is a really interesting conversation. I don't want to move away from it. Justin Jefferson, top 12, it's interesting. Especially unsexy. Way too many people reach for sexy, but that also kind of relates to who do you like as a wide receiver 1 from last year's class. Despite the fact you should value all 2018 wide receivers over last year's class. Not all of them. Most of them. Let's be reasonable. But like, I think it's becoming more and more this offseason. I've seen the DK Metcalf movement, and that moves us back to Jake here, who literally was DK Metcalf's biggest fan. Like, I think it was measured accurately.
What do you mean you've seen more movement?
Well, especially after the season, I think AJ Brown was the consensus. In my small bubble on Twitter, AJ Brown was a clear, oh, that's the guy we all wanted. He went to a bad situation, but he's done so much with it. And Corey Davis sucks because you're all haters. But
I've maintained that forever.
Lately, just the tone of the conversation seems to have switched to DK Metcalf, that high upside. It's a sexier upside, frankly. And that's what made me think of it.
Going, 8 spots behind AJ as far as wide receivers? I mean,
yeah, that's fine. That's why I'm asking. Is that where you're at, though?
Is that where I'm at? I think.
Well, not you. Obviously, you've had DK Metcalf above Calvin Ridley since he was in fucking grade school. But like anyone else,
I did draft him out of high school, by the way.
I think that for me, in any way, DK Metcalf isn't in my top 3, and I'm not saying he's very far away from that, but I would go AJ Brown 1. For 2, I would probably have to go Terry McLaurin. Yeah, he probably should have got the draft capital that he didn't get. And then after that, I'd have to go Marquise Brown, because you look at what Marquise Brown was able to do last season while injured the entire season, both in training camp and during the year, and people are just acting like there was no context to whatever up and down season that he had. I would have to put DK probably after that at that point for me.
But wasn't that the reason why Marquise Brown was drafted in fantasy circles as low as he was? Because of this constant concern with injuries and with guys of that size. And then giving him the pass, to me, it's AJ Brown, and then I think DK has the most upside out of anybody else in that class, and that is, I mean, I think I had AJ Brown, N'Keal Harry, and my Kelvin Harmon, which I won't even talk about pre-draft ahead of DK, and then DK was 4, and I like to tweak Jake and put Paris Campbell ahead of, well. but I had them graded out the same, so. Now with the benefit of hindsight, I was probably a little bit low on DK, but man, I still will take AJ Brown then DK and be happy about either one I get.
See, I think all of them have the potential to suddenly be that guy who flashed but never really put it all together. Hey, Jesse Reeves is in the chat. I can't find him in the DM thread to come in here and talk to us, but he's got time to come into the chat. Hey, Jesse. It's actually probably because we're full and I told everyone we're not. Sorry about that. We'll get some more people in here soon, I promise. But AJ Brown hit the top 24. It's a lot harder to see him falling out of that again, despite being on a worse team. That's still a worse team. It was the lowest passing offense last year in terms of overall attempts. I'm not sure if I knew that before I was doing vacated targets research. But DK Metcalf was great. He had a great first year. Jake, you heard me say that, right? You're not going to get too mad. I mean, he was amazing. He's great. Got better as the season went on. Did everything you would hope to see from a player of that type. But his production wasn't so great that you can say it's less likely it was more of a flash in the pan. It could turn out that way. I don't think so. I'm not fading him in as ADP or anything, but I mean, he didn't make himself bulletproof. Marcus Brown, same thing. Obviously, he did basically what we thought he was, right? But it is amazing the player who ended up on the best team from last year that we think's, going to be a good team for the successive years now with Lamar Jackson, who did a really good rookie season, but he's still the forgotten man from that class. Like, I can't trade for N'Keal Harry, who had a terrible season, for nothing, J-Mike. But I can get Marcus Brown, who actually had a good first season and has more draft capital on a better team. Basically, they're thanking me for taking him. So what's going on there?
It's got to be the injury risk. I mean, everybody assumes that they know, more than NFL doctors know about injuries. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm not saying that that's not within his range of possibilities, but I think you also have to understand that, things happen to players. It's not necessarily a career-defining thing that he was injured last season. I don't think in the way that Zach was saying just a moment ago, I don't think that he was given a pass for that injury. I think everything you're talking about right now about how it's so easy to acquire him because people are so scared of that kind of shows how people still feel. I just would say that, I mean, what if he's healthy? What if he actually gets a healthy 1 or 2 or 3 seasons? Then we're looking at a guy with no real competition around him, at least in terms of wide receivers. Tight ends are a whole different story. That, like you said, is positioned on the best team of all the other ones that were drafted last year. And I think that can be very, very valuable moving forward.
I think there's a couple pieces to that as well. One is a little bit of, what do you call the opposite of recency bias? He started
future bias?
Yeah, he started out extremely hot early on the season. I mean, he was one of the waiver wire gems in redraft leagues.
Okay.
And then he fell off, had some injuries. And 2, it's kind of the profile that he fits into. I mean, he's a deep threat, Deshaun Jackson type of player. That player tends to be more streaky, and those players tend to get less hype in fantasy because I don't know how you guys would feel, but I would think people probably overweight consistency a little bit in that regard. But I think those 2 factors might play a part.
And even still, one of the things that, even if you stick with the recency bias like you're talking in reference to, Jake, one of the things that Marquise Brown did was exactly what many people had pegged him to likely do. He was as small, if not smaller than basically any wide receiver prospect from a mass standpoint that we had seen in a while, if ever. Smaller than T.Y., I think, smaller than Brandon Cooks, smaller than all those guys. And he ended up getting hurt. So yes, he showed you the flash, which was great, but then he ended up getting hurt and he didn't do a ton for you toward the end, right? So both he and N'Keal Harry both come into this season with so much stank on them all of a sudden that not even a first round draft pick draft capital is saving them from the stank of year one of how bitter it left people, because all of a sudden we have the questions, even though N'Keal's hurt, and it's probably not even fair. A lot of people are like, well, can he separate? Can he get on the same page with Tom Brady? Can he learn an NFL offense? Is he smart enough? And the same questions with Marquise. Is he big enough? He keeps getting hurt. I'm not going to wait on him, like Eitan said, for 2 and 3 years down the line because he's going to play in only 16 games in the next 3 seasons. And so now we're stuck in this what's the word? Self-fulfilling prophecy almost. And so it's really hard to wash that stink off. Whereas even with Terry McLaurin, people aren't. I mean, he didn't finish the year incredibly well either, but he lit it up so well with Case Keenum that it's almost to some degree that he gets a pass with a lot of people. So I know, Peter, this is way far off from your question from earlier, but
thank God.
Like right now, even if we look at DLF ADP, AJ Brown in March, AJ Brown's wide receiver 11, DK Metcalf is right on his heels at 15.
Is he really?
So yeah, how about that, right?
Right.
So
my little bubble, right.
So now, so one of the questions that I'm curious of, both of those guys are likely to be the wide receiver ones in run first offenses. So how much, like, what's the cap on opportunity? Are these guys who can push to 125, 130 targets in a whole season? Because last year DK had 100, and so that's not really going to give you the upside that you're wanting, even though he showed us a lot of goodness from that. If for whatever reason, one of the people that I'm curious about is Terry McLaurin, because obviously he didn't get the draft capital that we want, and I'm sorry to rant, but he was a guy that we watched do really special things to start the year, which was fun to see. But who the heck was around him to take any kind of work? And I know that's something that Jesse Reeves talks about and harps on a lot, is who was even around him. So would it be crazy if all of a sudden the order that whatever we have these guys in now, would it be crazy if somebody in the same class shot up past these guys? If N'Keal Harry all of a sudden came out and had 120 targets and was, had a better season than all three of them, I don't think that it's crazy. So
it's crazy. It's not outside of the realm of possibility. But again, this is all I mean about Harry, who, everyone can blame for having me on. Like, you could find no one pushing to draft N'Keal Harry harder than me. So, like, if this isn't a walk away comment, I'm still trying to acquire him. I still really like his profile, but there is a 0% hit rate from having a first season as bad as N'Keal Harry and JJ Arcega-Whiteside. And that's not just measured in terms of yard. Like, I've looked at it every way I can. I can find 0 positive. I can find more positive for Andy Isabella, who had like 3 targets for 1 touchdown, than I can for either of them. And that goes back to 2000, as far as I can look, with the data I've got. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but crazy to expect, yes, a little bit. Also, just to interject, just one thing for a second, it gets a little crazy when you compare Cortland Sutton and DJ Moore's ADP to these guys, although DJ Moore is one of those people that I think is shooting up right now. And also, I literally paid for an upgrade at StreamYard here because Spaceman, the guy in the corner that doesn't say anything and just looks handsome and impressive, he shamed me into streaming on Twitch and YouTube, and it was the only way I could do it. And we finally, Crossover 27 here is listening over here on Twitch. So holding up for the Twitch family. I appreciate you, Crossover. But yeah, back to Cortland Sutton especially. I think his ADP is similar, if not... I don't know. It's much harder to trade for Sutton than it is for DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, and that's the crazy part to me. Players that look good in their first year, plus players that broke out. Like the likelihood of their future success is exponential at that point. Like, there's a big difference between the likelihood that Cortland Sutton's going to keep being fantasy relevant versus even admitting that DK Metcalf was really good in his first season, that he's going to continue to be good. And again, did someone say there was no one around DK Metcalf, or were you talking about Marcus Brown at that point? Because I've got some Tyler Lockett flags to wave if someone said that.
Yeah, I heard that too. I heard that the DK was the clear one, and
yeah,
I heard
the
that.
Hell? What the hell? Whoever said that?
Yeah, I was saying that about Marquise Brown. That's not DK Metcalf at all. I was over the moon with Tyler Lockett last year. If you listen to anything that I was ever on, and I still kind of am, and that's kind of my issue with DK Metcalf. You're in a run-first offense. You're in an offense that isn't going to throw the ball all that often. You have Tyler Lockett around you. They just signed another tight end. They have pieces, and they have so many other people on that team to take targets away from DK. I think when it's all said and done, 3 years down the line, DK Metcalf is the wide receiver 1 for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm trading away Tyler Lockett right now kind of for that reason, because I saw that transition a little bit. But if we're talking about,
can't give up on players that earn the level of volume. Like, there's a Christian Kirk problem right now as well. But like, volume to me is more important than points. It just is. I don't want to bet on efficiency maintaining versus volume maintaining. And players that earn the level of target share that Tyler Lockett and also Christian Kirk have are impressive at the different points in their careers. Like, that doesn't just go away forever. Like, maybe Lockett would fade on a team with a wide receiver 1 DK Metcalf. That can happen. But he's still going to be consistently good in the NFL. I think he's more than proven that. I mean, you don't have to reach for Julio Jones to get a Jeremy Maclin out of him, or Emmanuel Sanders behind, some, I can't say what names now, Demaryius Thomas, so I'll shoot for a hard one. And like his range of outcomes at this point, to my mind, based on what he's done in the NFL, is a considerable flaw. So I think, fading him at his ADP especially, I don't know about that.
I mean, I'm still caught up on the fact that, after getting called up by Peter, and then J. Mike just is sitting back with this wet blanket that Peter's throwing over N'Keal Harry. all I'm hearing from Peter is just basically Corey Davis PTSD with N'Keal Harry. So
basically, yeah.
So, okay. And then as far as these, the 2019 or the 2019 wide receivers, if you look at when you're talking about volume wise, if their TD rates were very high, they were extremely efficient catching TDs like Marquise Brown, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. And that is something to worry about. Will that efficiency keep up over the increase in volume, hopefully? So that'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure if Marquise Brown and his injuries can handle that. And I know DK had injury concerns too coming in. So it's just a worry that I have. But I've been converted. I should have been listening to Jake originally with DK Metcalf. That was a mistake. So I have him as number 2 now. He's like a top 15 wide receiver. Yeah.
What were you about to say, Jake?
I'm loving this episode so far.
We should talk about Adam Thielen just to completely, get him euphoric.
I got a question for you, Jake, though.
Yeah.
So right now, DK's going off the latest DLF ADP as wide receiver. What do we say? 15. CeeDee Lamb is going as wide receiver 17.
Yeah.
Are they that close in your book, or is that? Would you take CD over him? I'm going to make this is the David man. I'm going to make you cut the baby in half. Make a decision.
People have tried to make me do this on Twitter.
Or Solomon.
Before.
That's not David.
I was like, you can have my second child instead. So I think it's really tough. I mean, I would say that DK does have that top 5 wide receiver potential. And for someone that doesn't really minimize risk all that much, that kind of lends me to want to take DK. Because I think their floor might be somewhat similar, if that makes sense. So I think CD's ceiling's a touch lower. I think top 12 is definitely in the range of outcomes. But I do think DK has that higher ceiling. So I think if I was forced to choose, I would take DK. And plus we've seen it. We've seen him have a really good rookie season, especially at the end there. So I think I'd go DK by just the hair.
Now, really quickly, I just wanted to ask, I mean, while I have the opportunity to talk to a bunch of people that are much smarter than me, the knock against DK Metcalf last year was that, okay, well, this is a guy that only runs one route. He runs one route well, but he only runs one route. Have we seen, is there data to suggest that, over time, it's actually a likelihood that wide receivers generally get more and more versatile, or are they who they are kind of within the first couple of years of what we see from them?
I don't have the answer to that, but I have the answer to the DK portion of that. And for me, and this was my argument going back and forth with Jake pre-draft, was Metcalf needs to be on a team where a coach will use him that way. And he was. Pete Carroll did a fantastic job. And I know DK Metcalf is a little more versatile than we give him credit for, but not a lot. He runs a lot of 9 routes. He runs a lot of slants, and he's very, very good at that, almost unstoppable at that. And so because Pete Carroll let him do that, and because he also has Russell Wilson, who is the most efficient quarterback in the NFL, throwing him the ball, that to me is repeatable. And it goes back to Dave talking about touchdowns. Russell Wilson may be the one quarterback in the NFL who can sustain that touchdown rate on such a low volume of passes. He did it. You saw him do it before I can't even remember the guy's name that was there before Lockett. I loved him.
Doug Baldwin.
Doug Baldwin. So he did it with Doug Baldwin. He did it with Lockett for a year. He's done it with DK Metcalf. Like, Russell Wilson is that efficient. And so that to me is a win for DK Metcalf in situation, because that was the big question I had for him was, is he going to be in a situation where they will do, it's kind of like what Belichick does, where Belichick will find a player who does something well and say, do that. We don't need you to do everything else. And Pete Carroll has done that with Metcalf. Just go be that downfield guy, go get the ball, and Russell Wilson will throw it to you.
So then my follow-up is, are we overrating versatility when it comes to looking at prospects?
Yes and no. So yes, because they don't necessarily have to be versatile, but no, because if you're assuming rational coaching, and this goes back to Sigmund Bloom and like the, assuming rational coaching is a bad play in this game where we're relying on the NFL to do the quote unquote right thing or the rational thing. And so you can take a player who can do one thing exceptionally well and have him do that thing. Or you can take that player and say, oh, you have to be able to do everything, on our offense. And then all of a sudden you mitigate that player's effectiveness. So it's a double-edged sword. And that's part of what makes this game really, really difficult, is because even if you evaluate the player correctly, you're still relying on him being used in a way that highlights his talent.
I think one of the things is it's hard. Like you want to say the efficiency in Seattle can't keep up, but Russell Wilson, and I rarely make a quarterback argument, Russell Wilson does not seem willing to let that happen.
Yeah.
So, but like you are betting on Russell Wilson to keep carrying that team against all odds. And that's fine because he's proved he can do it.
But it's the same thing you've been doing with Devontae Adams in Green Bay, and you've been betting on Aaron Rodgers to throw touchdown passes to him. I mean, Devontae Adams.
Well, yeah, but they still pass for a significantly higher
Devontae
volume.
Adams has only had 2,000-yard seasons. It's like he's been right up to the cusp. Like he's been good, but he's been sustained by touchdowns because Aaron Rodgers is really efficient. And there are some quarterbacks that just do that, that's why Kyle and I keep going back and forth over the Green Bay number 2. And I don't want that guy because they don't throw enough to make that really. And I guess maybe that's an argument against DK, but I think it's a slightly different situation. And I think Metcalf is better than anybody who's been the number 2 in Green Bay for a long, long time.
I don't think it's just a matter of of the wide receiver 2 not possessing enough volume. There's enough volume in Green Bay that you can swallow enough of it to be efficient through volume if you're good enough. There really isn't. Like the wide receiver 1 in Seattle has to be remarkably efficient. Like that guy has to be remarkably efficient compared to Devontae Adams in order to be relevant. Like that's the level of difference we're talking about. Or I'm talking about. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your podcast, guys. Keep going.
I mean, taking a step back with DK Metcalf and just going back to him coming into the league, I always, and how to look at him through data. I know a big thing with you, Peter, is looking at market share. And DK, when you look at, and there's a couple different ways to look at market share. There's the market share by game that I think Player Profiler does a lot, and then there's what you and I kind of do is we look at it just from the market share of the total offense and not pro rate or not rating or weighting it for games played or anything. And the people who do advocate for the market share by games played, like Player Profiler, this is when I think it comes useful. When you see them flash, like DK flashes here, that's when I'll switch over and say, look, we had a signal early on, and I'm going to pivot off my original take and know when to switch my original my evaluation, because there were signs I didn't weight them enough, but now that I've seen it like him produce, I need to switch over and stop being so stubborn.
Yeah, as our lone Twitch commenter, Crossover 27's getting a lot of grace here. Like I'm just going to mention everything he says. Twitch family, baby. But is Aaron Rodgers going to keep that efficiency up? Is he bad now? I guess is that question.
He's not the player he once was. I think some people
good enough for Devontae Adams to keep it up, maybe.
Yeah,
if that's the argument.
Absolutely. Because listen, Aaron Rodgers, as much as I hate his guts, being a longtime Vikings fan, was like the Patrick Mahomes of his era for quite a while. Like the all-star, crazy talent, can make every throw on the field. Him downgraded for an efficiencies perspective doesn't mean that he is necessarily dead. He's just not the elite quarterback that he once was. So I think people want to be a little bit too drastic, when a player might fall off a little bit. I mean, especially at quarterbacks who can play longer, and say that they're dead, even though that they're still probably a top 10 to 12 option.
Speaking of quarterbacks, like something's bugging me a little bit. I don't know what to do about it. I know you're all wide receiver fans and you all hate running backs, but just to bring it back to the rest of the team, like there are other players besides wide receivers, guys.
We're going to talk tight ends?
No. What's the point, really? Apart from the fact Zach Ertz still not left the team, guys. Still waiting for that. I was promised he would leave the team. And then Dallas got a breakout. Weird how that didn't happen. Anyway, quarterbacks. How many more revolutionary new era quarterbacks can there be? Like we're clearly seeing a turnover at quarterback right now with the next generation, if you like, turning up with Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. Although his price is way too high based on the way he scores his fantasy points. But we're definitely seeing a new influx at least. But how many times can that happen? Like how many years can we say we're going to draft the next Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in the later rounds? Like there can't be too many more to break out, right? Or
I think we're
There's
seeing
still a couple.
I think we're seeing the
How long
end
did
of
we
it
go
coming.
through of having Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers and all those same quarterbacks.
Philip Rivers was never one of those guys, and Tom Brady was never like a Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson.
But even
top
just
5
being
scorer.
like franchise guys for their teams.
Okay.
I mean, for a long time, it seemed like that was, that area, that age of quarterbacks were kind of the only quarterbacks that were around. And it took how long until we got this real new age of elite level quarterbacks?
I think we're coming to the end of that rope. I think we have to. And I don't think it has anything to do with the talent level at the quarterback position, whether in college or the young guys that are in the NFL. I think it has everything to do with just the number of spots that are available. We're seeing that right now with guys like Jameis Winston, like Cam Newton, not necessarily being signed. Eventually, there comes a point where these places are occupied, and once they're occupied for a really long time if they're a really good player. So, I mean, Justin Fields, I don't know, but I mean, with Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence coming up next season, I think we're kind of getting to the point that, there's going to be spaces that are starting to dry up. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger is probably the guy that you're looking at right now that maybe you don't necessarily see being around in the next 2 seasons. But, I mean, after that, I don't know how many really, really old quarterbacks are going to be out of the league all that quickly, of course, with Brady.
No, all I mean by I don't know about that is there's always at least 20 teams that don't have one of those guys, even franchise guys. And frankly, the Bears are going to, have one literally hell of a season with Trubisky and Foles fighting it out. And then that's going to look like as an open situation as anywhere else. I mean, there's always going to be teams that could use, quote unquote, a good quarterback, right?
And I think you're seeing now and we kind of discussed this a little bit in the chat before the show, but you're seeing this really strange offseason with free agency, with quarterbacks and running backs specifically, where guys are being cut, guys are not being signed as free agents. I mean, you still got Cam Newton, you still got Jameis Winston kind of floating out there in free agency. And I think part of this is the way the pay scale is, and the NFL is wising up to, if you are stuck in the middle, if you have a middle tier quarterback, that's purgatory. That's not a place you want to be. And so you're better off not having saddling yourself with a Derek Carr contract, not saddling yourself with one of these, huge upper echelon contracts, which you have to do. The next quarterback is going to be the highest paid player in the NFL until the next quarterback. I mean, that's just how this works. And so I think you're seeing that, plus the kind of pervasiveness of the 7-on-7 football is really bringing to play quarterbacks at an early age. And so now I think you're seeing guys who come in and are really good and are getting a shot early. I mean, Lamar Jackson's a different case because he's just the best athlete I've seen play the position ever. I mean, he's incredible. He puts guys on ice skates. But that to me is the thing, that you're now seeing teams willing to give up on quarterbacks earlier. You're seeing teams, smart teams, try to avoid that Derek Carr, contract. And I keep coming back to him because he's the one I pick on always. And I think that's what you're seing is, because there are more players coming in and the cycle is getting quicker. I don't think you're going to see teams have a Brady who plays for 20 years. I don't think you're going to see teams have, maybe Brady's a bad example, but Philip Rivers. I don't think you're going to see a Philip Rivers. I don't think you're going to see a quarterback who is a middle tier quarterback that doesn't get you over the hump get paid and paid and paid like you have in the past. I think they're going to start flipping guys. I think they're going to start. I mean, you saw it with the Cardinals. Okay, we drafted Rosen. We don't think Rosen's the guy. We're going to ship Rosen while we can and bring in somebody else. And I think you're going to see that, which is going to kind of have this revolving door for fantasy where some of those guys are going to be available coming in every year.
I think the problem there is there's just not enough quarterbacks to do that with. You know, if all these teams aren't going to pay these quarterbacks market value, I mean, maybe it's happening with Jameis, maybe it's happening with Cam. We don't know Cam's medicals, but I don't know if there's going to be enough quarterbacks to be able to do that.
What? Why? Well, like, what difference does it make whether you finish 8-8 or 6-10? It does, like that doesn't matter. Or it's actually better to finish 3-13.
Not from a coach's perspective, though.
And not from a management's perspective either.
But they're not.
All of this is really bleak for fantasy production. Let's point it out. Like, if a quarterback comes in, sucks, gets chucked, gets a Nick Foles brought in, like, you don't want any of that team. If that's happening through 20 teams in the league, then.
But how many teams are there right now that you don't want guys on? And how many of those players can you hide as a coaching staff? Jared Goff, to me, is one that has been absolutely hidden by that coaching staff. Like, Jared Goff has been a serviceable quarterback for fantasy and a decent – he was in a Super Bowl as an NFL quarterback. I don't think he's very good. But he produced, but
he sustains like 3 fantasy wide receivers. So,
well, that's what I'm saying. But do you think that's Jared Goff, or do you think that's what they're doing?
Sean McVay. Sean McVay's playing quarterback through the body of Jared Goff. Like, I don't think that's going to happen too often. If we're talking Jared Goff on 20 teams and they're getting cycled every other half year, then I think. But Devontae Parker is not the upside we're going to get. But
that's exactly my point. Is Jared Goff? If Jared Goff was on another team, they would be terrible. They would another coaching staff.
Yeah. Right.
So then you cycle him out, and then so eventually you're going to end up with, again, guys coming in because there are 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Maybe not 2 or 3 every year, but there are at least 1 or 2 every year that come in that have potential to be very, very good quarterbacks. And I think you're going to continue to see that.
But then you get to the Joe Flacco corollary, where a quarterback who you might not think is the best guy in the world achieves success at the right time in his career. I think that's what happened with Jared Goff. I think the same thing's happening right now with another guy that plays quarterback with the same initials, J&G, right now, Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco. I just think that, again, from an organizational perspective, if you already achieve some sort of success with your guy, you're tied to it, because the prospect of falling off that cliff, it's not appealing to the guys that actually are in charge and making these decisions.
I think we should just timestamp this episode of the 101st minute of the 100th minute or the 101st minute of the 100th episode of the Dynasty Crossroads. Peter Howard makes a coaching narrative argument for Jared Goff. So I just think that's a really important moment there in the show.
We're not. I was going to ask who are the teams that we actually want to draft players from then, but I just want to point out, like, Jake left again on the 101st minute of the 100th podcast of those Crossroads as I made a coaching narrative, so that's fitting too. And Mike, could you stop begging everyone to take your place? Like, you know how much I look forward to talking to you, and the minute you get in here, you're like, hey, Jesse, I'll leave. You can talk. Hey, dude over there, why don't you just... break my heart.
Well, he said.
But
he
yeah,
said
who
he
are the
has
team?
no-
No, not listening to it. I get it. No.
See-
Carry on, J. Mike. What are you gonna say?
No,
Jesse
I
Reeves.
just want to add a very basic point to what is probably a much more nuanced discussion than I can add to. If we go back to the Aaron Rodgers thing that we were discussing previously, while we know that he's going to have a starting job likely for as long as he wants to, for fantasy perspective, I feel like we as a community kind of recycle, and maybe to the good or to the bad, I'm not sure. We recycle this narrative that, hey, we want to be out a year earlier on a guy than being in too late. Right. So, and one of the things that we talked about, Peter, when I was on the Crossroads last, is just this idea of being able to extract the most value out of running backs that we can, and basically get rid of them at their apex of value. Right. And so if that's the case, also with quarterbacks, we get to these guys where if you're not seeing it after 2-3 years, you don't want to be the one that's holding the bag on someone like Derek Carr right now. Because nobody's paying you for Derek Carr. Nobody's giving you any kind of value for Derek Carr. Whereas, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? He's an MVP type of player or at least he had an MVP type of season. And all of a sudden, now we are light years from where that value was. And so I think that even with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and somebody in the chat, shout out to the person that was asking this, Alex, he was in the chat asking Aaron Rodgers or Daniel Jones. And you would have asked that a year ago, and you would have been laughed out of every single chat that you'd ever be in for Dynasty. However, here we are a year later, and now Daniel Jones is nipping at the heels of Aaron Rodgers and ADP. They're back to back. So from a value perspective, I think it's built in us, and it's something that's hammered home always, is that typically while we want the points, we still want the value to be at its highest point on our team, and we want to be basically handing the hot potato to somebody else. So I think that's one of the really interesting things that we have to balance with these guys who are either these mid-tier type of guys who are kind of falling by the wayside, your Jimmy G's from a fantasy perspective, or even a guy like Aaron Rodgers who's not giving us this ceiling that was absurd at one point and is now giving us something that isn't exciting to anyone in the leagues that you're in, aside from Packers fans. So.
And I would even echo. Sorry, Peter. I would just echo what J Mike's saying too. Is we've been talking about quarterbacks for about 10, 15 minutes, and a name that is jumping off the pages is screaming value to me in ADP wise and rankings wise is Matthew Stafford. He's in that that zone where he feels like he's been in the league for 25 years, but he's only like 32, I think. And he as a per game level, he was a QB1 last year, or a top 12 QB. And I think he's pretty easily can be had in Superflex leagues and Dynasty leagues. So Matthew Stafford's a name that jumps off the page that kind of fits this whole narrative we've been talking about.
Absolutely agree. I just got him.
Yeah,
for
I was
4%.
just gonna say.
I just got him for. Sorry, Peter. I just got him for 4% in a Superflex auction, 14 team.
Wow,
4% of budget.
Wow.
I mean, he's definitely being ranked as what's his ADP?
QB 16 right now.
Oh,
Yes.
he's 16. That's even higher than I thought he was. But it does seem like his values might even be below that because you get after a certain tier there, and I feel like they might feel all the same for about 8 quarterbacks.
He's slumming in my ranks. He's my QB 12 overall in my Superflex ranks, and I have him ahead of Matt Ryan and Aaron Rodgers right now. Just
wow,
he's got to stay healthy, and they're Detroit, that game script, they're going to have to pass the ball a lot in Detroit, and I don't see Matthew Stafford not putting up those big point totals as long as he stays healthy. So
I was just going to say that's typically J-Mike, to be all humble and like, I can't add to a high-level discussion and then just do a complete mic
then he's the most
drop it,
the whole situation. Yeah,
a silky smooth voice.
Just going back to Matthew
exactly.
Stafford.
Just smoother than
Let me show
everyone,
you guys
smarter
how
than
to do
everyone.
it real quick.
Just going back to Matthew
Yeah,
Stafford.
right. This is what you're all trying to say.
Last year, he was one of the best quarterbacks per game in the NFL. He was actually 5th overall in terms of completion percentage over expectation, which is one of Josh Hermsmeyer's metrics on airyards.com. 4.2% completion percentage over expectation. His ADOT was actually the highest of his career at 10.6. And he has Kenny Galladay. Marvin Jones was injured all last season. He's probably going to be healthy, or maybe not probably going to be healthy, but you would expect for him to play more games than he did last year. He still also has TJ Hawkinson, who, of course, rookie tight ends don't necessarily break out in that first year. So you just expect him to get better and better and hopefully stay on the field as well. There's so many things going Matthew Stafford's way that it's kind of crazy to think about him in this manner. But what we were just talking about quarterbacks and how teams are moving off them, there's already been smoke coming out of Detroit that they're looking at potentially moving off Matthew Stafford. And that kind of goes to what we were talking about. Like, at some point, I don't think these older quarterbacks are going to get as long as a leash as they've had in the past. And if that's the case, what Peter was saying about this being bad for everything is definitely a problem, because there is a real thing about building rapport with a team and actually having receivers that have been with this quarterback for a long time, so on and so forth. If that's going to change so often, I think it's going to really cause us to start to just look at the game differently altogether.
Now we're back to my receivers that just drip unsexiness. My guys that are close to the line of scrimmage, that create a lot of separation that mediocre quarterbacks can get a hold of.
Christian Kirk? Was that Christian Kirk, love?
I mean, it could have been Kirk. It could have been Cooper Kupp. It could have been Jarvis Landry. I mean, there's just a myriad of players that Jamison Crowder.
Wide receiver 4 gets no respect. Like I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd. I know I'm speaking your language. Tyler Boyd. Like these are the type of players that are going to be even like Calvin Ridley. Be that type of like. And to me, now you're in my wheelhouse. This is a show that I was going to do before this show. I may stay up and do it after, but like looking at this draft class, looking at the uncertainty with. The COVID-19, the virus, and looking at the uncertainty of training camp and everything that happens up, including the season this year. And I'm looking at this 2020 draft class saying, okay, we're going to get a lot. We've had a lot of hype so far. We're going to get a huge amount of hype when the draft happens on a pedestal because there's going to be nothing else. I mean, there's no hockey, there's no baseball, there's no basketball, there's nothing else. It's going to be the NFL draft. Boom. Everybody's going to be talking about it. It's going to be on ESPN. It's going to be on NFL Network. It's going to be on Twitter. And now all of a sudden I'm looking at that as this huge inflation point to sell for some of these players right now that are veterans that are back in that range with Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett. And those players, to me, are a far safer bet. And you're actually going to probably get them plus for some of these draft picks because people are so excited about the players in the 2020 class.
Criminally underrated Jarvis Landry jumps to mind too.
Yeah.
So we'll just mic drop the Crossroads around about there with Zach going off. And with staying live viewers, we have to stay faithful. Like that's who are the teams? I want to go back to my question. Who are the teams that you actually want to draft in fantasy? It's something that John Bosch mentions quite a lot, that you can actually start drafting players from teams rather than players themselves if you want points, frankly. And it goes back to Eaton's point, actually, a little bit, is where I was going to drop it, where he mentioned Baltimore again. Is Baltimore not one of them? They're just one of the smartest teams over the course of their history of the last however many years you want to mention. They just tend to be smarter. Fantasy points come there, and they come there cheaper than most teams because they're not sexy, to tie in Zach's point.
I think the sneakiest one is Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh has done a fantastic job drafting and had their quarterback who could actually throw be replaced by a guy named Duck last year.
That's I have a column for that metric.
That's negative EV. I mean, like you're dropping players down. But I mean, you think about it. Either Roethlisberger gets healthy, or they add a quarterback this year or next year, and all of a sudden, and they probably will add at some point a running back. It won't be this year because they don't have a first round pick. Their draft is pretty thin. They'll probably add someone in the back end. I've heard a lot of rumbling about James Conner, but I feel like he's got another year of kind of respite. J. Mike, stop looking at me with the Benny Snell eyes. I see you. But like to me, that's a sneaky team. And yes, Eitan, the Ravens are one. I think you look at coaching staffs. I think you look toward we talked about the Rams, the Chiefs, Arians with the Bucks. I think those are offenses that you buy into. At least for me.
One that wasn't mentioned that is probably the unsexiest of all of these because of their past horrible decisions, Buffalo Bills. Look at what they've been doing in the last few years. Nobody wants to draft Buffalo Bills, but, I mean, look at that team. Honestly, look at how they built their team for the past couple of seasons.
Wait, Eitan, wasn't it you earlier? And I don't disagree with you, but then here comes the question. When we're looking at Buffalo right now, where are all of these targets going? Because, right? So the only reason I say it is because you just talked about how you value targets. Targets are your thing. And now we watch John Brown get a bunch of targets, give you a wide receiver 15 year. We watch Nicole Beasley give you, I think, a bottom end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 season. And then the next guy I'm pretty sure was Dawson Knox at like 50 targets. So all of a sudden, I don't love in terms of the distribution of targets or who we're buying into for volume's sake. One team that I will say real quick, I just want to throw this out there because I don't know if you said this or not, Zach. I blacked out. I was thinking about Justin Jefferson and how I plan on taking him now at like 103 everywhere just to make sure I get him. Atlanta Falcons.
Yes.
I find the Atlanta offense to be really fun to think about as a group. But Eitan, I know you were about to follow up with your Buffalo love there.
I mean, if you've followed anything that I've done over the past few weeks, I've just been
nothing. None of the things that you've done ever.
I've been on this hill alone.
We just download. We don't listen. That's the deal.
Hey, completely fine with me. If that is what you do, please keep doing it. I am all here for that. But honestly, I just think that
who are you talking to when you think about it? I mean, if they just
the 9 viewers that are here, please do 9 viewers. But I mean, J-Mike, I'm not here to go on that rant right now. I've already done that. But I would just say that I think that this team is going to be in the red zone a lot more than we think this team is going to be in the red zone. I understand the issues with Josh Allen's accuracy, but his ability to keep the chains moving with his legs is going to get them in scoring opportunities a lot. And if you actually look at their pass attempts last year, it wasn't horrible. If you actually look at the end of the season, the last 3 games of the season, they were like 33 pass attempts per game, which was higher than the average in the NFL. I think we're going to see a lot more out of Buffalo than we've seen in recent history.
I just want to interject here before Jake takes over with a smart point. That, I mentioned Baltimore, a good team that Dynasty Crossroads fully advocates targeting as a good team, and somehow we slid into Buffalo. And the Dynasty Crossroads as an organization, me in my basement, does not advocate this idea of Buffalo as a good team. Therefore, we target it. Like
we get the little
put
scroll,
that out there.
The little scroll disclaimer that views expressed on this program in no way reflect Peter Howard or Dynasty Crossroads.
Positive views of
not endorsements. Retweets do not equal endorsements.
On this podcast are not reflective of the
Yeah, let's just piss off the Bills Mafia a little more.
But I mean, I think the point that we're trying to make was pretty clear. That there are these teams that have bad name cachet, that have been bad for a long time, that are starting to turn things around are extremely valuable for fantasy drafters and for dynasty drafters because you can get pieces on these offenses a lot more cheaply than you'd be able to on, say, the Kansas City Chiefs, for example. And I think that there are edges to be had there.
Speaking of edges, I would just have to advocate too is that, like I was thinking from a practical side for fantasy, I think players are getting smarter and smarter as they're playing and how to find an edge, especially if you're playing in a bunch of leagues with a lot of smart people, with a lot of other analysts. I think you have to try to think sometimes a year ahead. And a team that I feel like it's a year away from could be an offense, sort of like how everyone was talking about Arizona last year. People were really getting excited about Arizona. I really am starting to think about how Miami as a potential, if they draft Tua or they get an upgrade at. I mean, this is really contrarian right now. I'm thinking ahead, but I'm trying to target some like a Preston Williams for cheap, or just be really aware of what Miami does in the draft and what players are drafting in Miami, just because I think people are really starting to see what Brian Flores' positive influence he's having on that entire organization. And I could see them being so.
And then Dolphins are going to Dolphins, and they're going to draft Justin Herbert ahead of Tua, and then we'll be right back where we started.
Please no, please.
Which is why you bypass them and go get Tyler Boyd right now. Even if you don't believe in him, you've got Burrow coming in. Boyd's stock is going to go through the roof. You can either sell him for a profit. He's going right now at 49th overall. In ADP, like he's going down in the range of Todd Gurley and McLaurin and DJ Chark, and I have a lot more confidence in Tyler Boyd as a receiver than I do in DJ Chark, even though they both put up last season, had a great year. I think you've seen Boyd do it again and again, and I think that with Joe Burrow coming in there, you're going to see a big uptick for him.
Positive views of Tyler Boyd are I'm pretty sure.
So it only took me a
I
year
don't know
to
about
convince
this
you.
whole Josh Burrow's going to be there, and that's a good thing. Like rookie QB, I don't know.
I mean,
But I like
perception,
Boyd a
Peter.
lot.
Peter, perception, man. If you're looking for this is 2 weeks ago, I bought stock in Abbott. I don't know if you know anything, but Abbott is a little medical company in Maine, and if you read the news at all, they have just developed a 15-minute COVID-19 test. They rolled it out in Michigan today. The Abbott stock has gone up $20 since I bought it. This is the time to buy Tyler Boyd before he rolls out the 15-minute COVID-19 test and Joe Burrow is drafted there. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, Tyler Boyd's a wide receiver one with the number one quarterback coming out.
New comment in the chat. Does Josh Allen improve on his QB6 finish from last year? I don't think so, Matt. Chris Allen says, just deal with that one real quick. Matt Miller mocked Pittman and Swift to Miami. Thanks, Chris. And again, DP says it's Drake, by the way. Drake PFSA Twitter handle. Thanks, guys. Hey, Drake. He's the one asking if Josh Allen improves his QB6 finish. So I guess if anyone else has a better answer, like
I'll just say that Jeff Ratcliffe thinks so. That's all I'll say.
Can I frame that slightly different? Does he have to improve on QB6? Like,
I guess improve could be maintain that level of production.
Oh, okay.
I guess does he stay in this? Like, I think it's really an aberrant year. He's a below average passer, and his rushing doesn't seem sustainable to me. That's my answer.
I mean, if you're buying him at his current ADP, thinking he's about to blow up beyond that point, I think you're in for a rude awakening.
Agreed.
But I think can he repeat that? I probably if his rushing touchdowns still kind of remain where they've been.
I think if he can stay in the top 10. Yeah, and I think if he can stay in the top 10, you're probably happy. Like so right now, just looking at it on paper, he's got the best supporting cast that he's had, right? And obviously we're early in the career, but he's got the best wide receiver that he's ever had, followed by the best wide receiver 2 that he's ever had. And likely he's got Dawson Knox, who everybody is very excited about, and Devin Singletary in the backfield and whomever they pair Devin Singletary with. So whomever they trot out next year, this is the best cast that he'll have or that he's had in his 3 seasons. And if he can give you top 10 again, I think you'd be thrilled.
It's fine, but know what we're betting on here. We haven't seen enough improvement to think he's becoming more than what we've always thought he was. So you're betting on Blake Bortles' production, which is fine if you're doing John Bosch, but Josh Allen has always been way above that value tier. And you're betting on a quarterback who looks more likely than not to have a Blake Bortles gives you points for free type career, but a lot higher because of those good wide receivers he's got around him. But that means the value just tanks right out from under you because the production is not sustained by high-level play. That's why we like good players who produce points, not players who don't look particularly better than most who produce points. If you can get them for nothing, like John Bosch says, with Blake Bortles and forever he was on Eli Manning, then that's a good point. Yeah, but you're not. You're playing virtually Patrick Mahomes prices for a guy who looks like the exact opposite. So I'm just going to be on the no train. Wet blanket of fantasy football, aptly named by a former co-host of mine, and that's where I'm at.
So I mean, with Josh Allen, I agree. I mean, I have probably hated Josh Allen. I cannot, as a quarterback, he's really frustrating to watch. He misses a lot of open throws, but what we haven't mentioned yet is that he has that rushing upside that's going to really give him a floor. I feel like as a producer for fantasy purposes. So. That's what I always come back to with Josh Allen is like, yeah, I don't think he's very accurate, which I really value in my quarterbacks, but that rushing, that Konami code really gives him a little bit of safety, despite like what Peter mentions, that Blake Bortles-esque type of, the way he performs.
The play doesn't back up the points. That's all I'm saying. And to DP's point here, and yeah, I'm calling you DP because I'm not even going to try the second half. Just calling you DP is actually more appropriate than me trying to pronounce the rest of that name. Apologize for that. He did give his Twitter handle earlier, though, didn't he? It was Drake PFSA on Twitter. He says that his rushing production was down, and notice how everyone runs to his rushing production to justify that QB6. So that's because his passing production did. Let's give him his credit. Josh Allen made a remarkable leap in his second year in terms of
6%. 6% completion.
It was incredible.
No,
An incredible put him Blake Bortles level pass.
I get it. They're starting from zero.
That's why everyone's betting on that rushing
improvements
upside, DP. It's not that he didn't do amazing things the second year. The young kid, as a person, incredibly impressed with the improvement he made. But his QB, his actual play still ranks incredibly low. And with all that production, you just got to bet that the play at some point matches the production. And that's a huge value drop off of where he's going right now. But yeah, Eaton, you were trying to say something smart instead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying his completion percentage did rise 6% between year 1 and year 2, which is remarkable, incredible. Like you were saying. But that's still at 58% right now. So I completely understand where everybody's coming from when they say, okay, so what? I would just say that, I don't know if we know everything there is to know about a quarterback 2 years into their NFL career. You can cite their collegiate career as well, but I think that there is still more room for improvement if the team around him is improved, and we just talked about how improved that team is long term.
I think this is what, just going back to our previous quarterback conversation, this is what coaches kind of get hung up on too, is because if they draft a guy, they're not perfect, especially at the quarterback position. They see flashes, they see potential, and they want to see that out. They're not ready to just, throw him to the curb and select another guy, because that could be the case if you were too hasty on a quarterback like maybe Josh Allen, who has definitely shown flashes, creates excitement, seems to be like a good team guy, but is he gonna win your team a Super Bowl? Like, is that a guy that's gonna get a second contract for the Bills? Should he get a second contract? I just have a hard time imagining that these guys aren't gonna keep getting some chances.
I think they are. Cole Beasley is incredibly underrated, both as an NFL player and a fantasy asset. I mean,
it's just because you are Cole Beasley.
Basically. I'm actually taller and heavier. Yeah.
And Jared,
wait. You have to spit a couple bars so we know if you're Cole Beasley or not for sure.
You might have to make sure I'm bad at rap. Right. Okay, yeah. Just take my word for it. Just take my word for it, Ethan. That was my rap.
Only Gabe can say he's bad at rapping. Let's be honest. You can't be like, oh, he's awful.
And speaking of which, I think the best comp I've ever come up with is Hunter Renfro's upside is Cole Beasley, because no one gets that's a positive thing. I think that's my favorite comp ever. Anyway, carry on. What were you saying, Jake? You finally come back on, and I'm like, let me just talk over you for a minute.
No, I'm good. That was it.
See, I ruined it. I get it.
Hey, Peter.
Yeah.
Just to mess with you a little bit. I guess to speak to your point to some degree, this is the depth of my research here that I just did, my nice hard work that I did for my research. Airyards.com. Shout out to Josh Hermsmeyer. And we talked about this on the open bar one week, and I just want to ask you guys real quick, where do you think Josh Allen ranked in CPOE, completion percentage over expected, in 2019? Just random guess, whatever comes to your mind.
Like what percentage over?
Where does he rank in completion percentage over expected, Josh Allen, last season?
I think I just saw this. It was actually it was pretty good, wasn't it?
I'm gonna
say 32nd. I'm saying 32nd.
I was gonna say 50th, but that was just me being a jerk.
Yeah. So his completion percentage over expected rank last year was QB 30. QB 30.
So that was
the win.
Peter, you're pretty close.
But from an air yard perspective, like he was, I think he was 13th. Like how do you guys marry that with when the data starts doing fun things like that? I'm just curious.
A fun thing. That's what I'm talking about. His actual play doesn't match his production. His passing play. He's an incredible rusher, which, by the way, everyone keeps forgetting to mention that. Josh Allen coming out, no one was like, this is Cam Newton. This guy can rush.
Nobody's forgetting that. No, Peter, that's not fair. That's not fair. Nobody's forgetting that with Josh Allen.
And everyone now talks about him as this great rushing QB. Like, no one saw that coming. They all thought he could improve as a passer, which he did to a significant degree last year, just not enough. But J Mike probably has his finger on the pulse better than me. So
No,
maybe
you are doing the thing that you call people out for left and right now. You have the revisionist history hat on right now.
I don't remember anyone saying he was a Russian QB.
People were calling him the white Cam Newton. What do you mean?
Were they?
He was known as being like super athletic.
I remember that.
I don't remember reading a single player evaluation of in college he's this great rusher.
Your greater point still
can't do in the
I hear you.
Okay. I take it back because J Mike's usually right, as we all know. And I am prone to make the same mistakes I criticize others for. So that's fine. That's entirely fair.
That's all of us. That is all of us.
I spend all my life
as long as you build your own individual straw man, it's okay. It's okay. Everyone build their own.
Hey man, it's like Burning Man. Don't judge me. I'm just out here building my own straw man, living my life without rules.
Just let me burn Josh Allen, please.
And again, to be very clear, I'm incredibly impressed with the player himself. Like, he did remarkable things to come into the league the way he did, the way he has, and impress the way he has. I just think he's not very good at passing the ball. I don't think that's likely to improve too much further.
I mean, and isn't that the story of the air yards versus the completion over expected? Is he's throwing the ball a long way over his receiver?
Well, I think it's in fact, one of the things that says it best is the arguments. If I get in an argument with Josh Allen, which I'm careful to avoid these days, and the positive argument.
He also ran for 727 yards in his last 2 years of college, by the way. Not to
again makes right. I completely made that up. Apparently, Yeah, the positive things about Josh Allen's 2019 are wide receiver stats. And by that, I mean stats owned by wide receivers. And if you're not a nerd, good job, man. I don't know how you avoided it. I just fell right into that trap. Became a nerd. But what I mean by that is they're shown to correlate to the wide receiver, not the quarterback and not the team. So the positive things from Josh... Yeah, it's Cole Beasley and Josh Allen and John Brown being good with Josh Allen passing him the ball. And the things that kind of measure how Josh Allen contributed to it look bad. But, shit happens. I mean, he shouldn't have improved as much as he already did, just to give Bills a little hope. I'm just in the basement. What do I know? And he shouldn't have done what he already did. So, it could happen. I just think it's outside the range.
I'm going to put a foot in both camps here. I'm going to state
of course you are. Constant middleman has never said a bad fantasy take because he's never said a bad fantasy take. Go for it, Eden. Let's hear it.
I completely agree with the certain statistics belong to wide receivers. I will say that a lot of Cole Beasley's and John Brown's success last year was due to volume. When you're looking at skill positions, it's volume that really guarantees everything. At that point, you can kind of go from there and figure out what's the next point that you want to add to whatever model that you're making that actually gives you whatever data point that it is that you're seeking. When it comes to quarterbacks,
are you trying to track me into a vacated targets?
This is the other side.
They're just laying around. Pick them up.
And I can see you coming a mile away.
This is the other side of that. When it comes to quarterbacks specifically, because like I said, volume, it usually is more of a boon for skill position players. When it comes to quarterbacks specifically, it's the efficiency that you like to see with quarterbacks because the efficient quarterbacks generally tend to have their jobs for longer. So, I mean, I can kind of see this from both ways.
Can we move on from Josh Allen?
Please.
We had some Chargers talk from Jesse.
Woo! This all started from talking about the best offenses in the league.
Yeah, right? Let me put my banner back up here.
Do we want to go back to Baltimore? Do we want to talk about Baltimore and how you could be drafting Gus Edwards?
Golly.
Baltimore's a good team. That's the difference.
I was thinking today about when Peter and I talked about Gus Edwards on one of our episodes. And I said, He is the worst prospect I've ever imagined. Thought about that earlier today.
Assuming rational coaching, though. That's the danger of assuming rational coaching. It doesn't matter. What matters is what the coaches feel about this player. If the coach is going to give this player opportunity, especially at the running back position. So if he's going to get carries, I don't care how bad he is. It doesn't matter because he's
Again,
an
we're
NFL
not
player.
talking about Jake has to move on, Eden. We get it. You are Mr. Josh Allen. You are tying your wagon to the
We were
feet
going back
of
to
Josh
the, we were
Allen.
going
How
back to
Josh
Baltimore.
Allen does is how Eden Mosier.
We just jumped off a pop-up
Tom
camper
Black.
into a flaming fold-out plastic table.
Hey,
Back to Josh Allen.
if you're gonna die, you want to go backwards in a blaze of glory in a Ferrari, and that's what Eaton's trying to do. I appreciate it. Don Black asked how many.
There's a way.
Don Black asked how many rushing TDs.
9.
does Josh Allen
Yeah,
have? I think it was
9 last
9,
year.
right?
Yeah.
It's consensus. We're saying 9. We're guessing, but we think it's 9.
I think there's two offenses that a lot of people like, and we can do whatever you want to do, Peter. But one, Jake's beautiful shirt, one in Cleveland. I feel like that a lot of people are excited about, as well as people I think want to see the encore of whatever Dallas has. And wow, this got really trippy with
I was trying to focus on Jake's shirt, and it's not working. It's not working at all. I was trying to bring his shirt up, but it doesn't give me
the
the
close
option.
up of Peter.
All of a sudden, my camera changes angle, controlling the angle.
All right, you're all allowed back in now. That's the only way to do it. Sorry, guys. Sorry. What were you saying, J-Mike?
a couple of offenses I feel like people are excited about. The Browns again. I'm curious if people are worried about having the rug pulled out from under them again in Cleveland. But also what Dallas's encore. Can Michael Gallup build on what he did? Can Amari Cooper stop breaking hearts and stop being in the rotation with Tavon Austin on big third downs and fourth downs? And I feel like those are a couple of offenses that run parallel to each other in different conferences that have a lot of parallels in terms of what the expectations of those offenses are, with star wide receiver who's kind of falling off a little bit, quarterbacks that we're excited about in the top 10 of Dynasty ADP, to some degree, a second wide receiver that's better than people think that they are, and then unproven tight ends who can maybe give us something, obviously stud running back. So I think there are parallels with those two teams that are fun to think about for this upcoming season.
I think people think Odell Beckham is a good number 2 wide receiver.
People get so upset. People get so upset when you point out, it's like, man, every time he and Jarvis Landry have been on the team, there was one time where he outperformed him, and all the other years Jarvis has been better. I'm just saying. You broke him, Zach. You broke him.
My mission is complete.
We got him to tap out. We finally got him to tap out.
I tap out constantly. I am nothing if not a quitter. No, again, you keep tempting with the vacated targets. I'm not gonna. No, I don't know how it's going to work. It is interesting that in the last year they played together, which most people prefer for prospecting. Jarvis Landry was wide receiver 1 in college when they played in the same team.
Yes. Thank you. Although when I use that in my argument, I was told that college production doesn't matter, so I don't know anymore.
Well, if you want, and that's fair, but I honestly have not much of a comeback. Well, I do actually, but I always do. But I mean, in the 1 year they played together in the NFL, Jarvis Landry was a wide receiver 1. I mean, that's kind of backed up by NFL production, is it not?
I'm with you.
I think it was their freshman year. Anyway, that Odell was better than Jarvis, but that's not.
No, he was better the first 2 years, and the 2 years before that he was more of a 1. But Jarvis Landry was higher in market share receiving yards. I know that one at least. In their final year. I haven't checked the fantasy points, to be fair, because Odell Beckham's kind of more of a efficiency receiver, so that's possible. But in terms of volume,
I have a question with this offense that doesn't revolve around the top two receivers, but revolves around some of the players that people are buying into right now for fantasy. And I see, and myself included, have bought into Nick Chubb, but you also have Kareem Hunt there, who is a very good receiver out of the backfield, probably better than Chubb. We can argue that. And then the other is Austin Hooper just ended up there. And I've seen a whole bunch of people really excited about Austin Hooper moving to Cleveland and being excited about him being a tight end because he was a tight end in Atlanta, where they just had the most pass attempts in the NFL.
My target research on tight ends is ongoing, to say the least. But it actually makes me more worried about Hooper than I'd probably like to admit, because he's a forgotten top 5 wide receiver tight end, or wide receiver, I guess, for the last couple of years. So he's offered really great value. But honestly, moving to a low volume offense is not good for a tight end that has relied more on touchdowns and targets. He doesn't look like an Ertz, and by the way, we mentioned Baltimore and targets. What I was going to say is Mark Andrews. Why does everyone think Mark Andrews is going to suddenly disappear? He was doing it in a very sustainable way. He looks different than those guys. It looks like an incredibly talented tight end, but one that's got a more traditional tight end role, not someone that's dominating an offense. I don't know if everyone's hearing the weird noises that I'm hearing when I talk. It's something like an English accent talking bullshit. But if you are, I apologize. But no, seriously, I am a little worried about Hooper moving there more than anything of the other movements. Like, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be fine. You know?
Yeah, it feels like people are just transferring Austin Hooper's stat lines and projections over to Cleveland, which I think is super dangerous.
Yeah, and again, you can, but as long as you do it through volume and role, and if you do that for, he's a top 12 tight end, very freaking obviously, but you shouldn't really care about top 12 tight ends. You can make them up with 3 top 32 tight ends. It's not a big deal, unfortunately. So he's very talented. He's worth betting on for that reason, but you should expect a regression.
Austin Hooper for the last 3 years, Peter. Are you now selling? Now that he's kind of reached that 6 range?
Hopefully I get more value than I'll be buying. But I'm significantly worried with him, with his team change. I still think he's going to be good. I just think it might be replaceable level. And at tight end, it's really easy to be replaceable level.
JJ Zachary's, I think just his projection, something like, I think it was in the 60 target range, somewhere close to Eric Ebron. So.
Yeah, he's going to lean a lot, and he could do it. He's a good player. He could get that red zone role, and he would do well with that. But it's harder to bet on than someone like Andrews, Kelsey, obviously. The guys are really easy to project a top 5 upside you care about. But it's all overpriced except for Ertz, which is what makes him interesting. I think he's kind of at value right now.
Except for Ertz is actually having a...
Yeah.
Ertz is maintaining his value in redraft.
And just to point out, that's one of the differences. Ertz changes teams, I'm not as worried because he's earned such a large portion of an offense. If you transfer over that role, even to a smaller passing offense, Ertz is still valuable with a top 5 upside. Someone like Hooper doesn't so easily. It's harder to see. It's not impossible. Hooper's a really good player, obviously, but it's harder to see.
So we're pivoting to Hayden Hearst then, yeah?
Oh, hell no. Come on, Zach. Don't kill me with every comment. God. I've been drinking, man. Come on. No, Hayden Hearst never. Sell Hayden Hearst every time, every place, everywhere. Which is probably going to owe me. He's going to be the new tight end 1. Then. I don't know.
I just moved into my top 25 Dynasty tight ends, and it felt disgusting doing it.
I mean, he's breakout age. He's 27.
Yeah, okay, second year in the NFL, third year.
I'm going to find a way to get you to talk about vacated targets. And the way that I'm going to do this is by talking about Hayden Hearst and Calvin Ridley. People are thinking Calvin Ridley is going to soak up everything in that offense. if he doesn't soak up everything in offense, then maybe Hayden Hearst has to. What do you have to say about, people looking at either of them? People think Calvin Ridley is going to be a top 12 receiver this year. I think that's kind of nuts. What do you think?
Calvin Ridley, I think top 12 is in his upside. That's the crazy thing about Calvin Ridley. He's being valued I think people are more. It's really weird. Sometimes I find myself making an argument against a player, saying he has top 24 upside because everyone think he's going to and then I have to reverse it for another player. I honestly think this goes back to vacated targets. That's why I'm hitting that pretty hard. And I hate to go there at this point because I'm really not finished with my research. But I think there is some logical misstep that the term vacated targets really encapsulates. Passing attempts are different than targets. And that's the way I'm trying to, that's a new way I'm trying to introduce my first article on the subject. Passing attempts are remarkably resilient year over year, team over team, coach over coach. That's fairly predictive. But and the way I've been trying to reintroduce this is there's a reason there isn't a 29% target share player on every team. And you know what that reason is. It's not complicated. Everyone knows there isn't a Jarvis Landry or DeAndre Hopkins on every team. But the term vacated targets lends us to a type of logic which creates this idea, Sterling Shepard can get 100 of Odell Beckham's targets because he's leaving so many behind. But that would create a 29% target player, which Sterling Shepard is not. At 23, 24, yes, but he was capable of that with Odell on the team, is the thing. It's within his range of outcomes of what he can earn over the other competition on his depth chart. And that all feeds into this misalignment between our concept of passing targets and passing attempts. And they're very different things. Anyway, sorry. I forgot what the original point was. Chin chin.
No, that was it. We were trying to drag you into that conversation.
Mission accomplished.
It's not a Dynasty Crossroads episode until someone talks about vacated targets.
It's something to explain because so much of the argument me is that's my point. You're angrily arguing my very point back at me. I posted a history of what the wide receiver 2 did after wide receiver 1's left. And someone was honestly trashing me, which is fine because it's Twitter and I don't bring my feelings to it because I don't want to get hurt that many times in a day. But he was like, this is useless. And I was like, that's the point. You can't compare Odell Beckham to Sterling Shepard. They're different players. Of course, he's not going to pick up Odell targets. Odell's getting a lot of targets Sterling Shepard won't pick up. He's a very different player. That's the point. So you can't transfer volume in that way. And I think vacated volume, vacated targets, just the phrase lends very smart people playing fantasy football, because everyone playing it smart. I love you guys, by the way. To make this very logical but misstep in thinking you can attribute that to someone else on the depth chart. And that's the way passing attempts work, because there's now volume available, but it's not the way targets work. They're actually quintessentially different.
So here's my question. Here's my question. How do you identify the players like Chris Godwin? And obviously, we've identified Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, that type of player. And 2 years ago, Tyler Lockett. How do you identify that type of player who is playing the secondary role, who can get that level of attention in an offense?
I'm going to do a shout out because it's an absolutely awesome podcast. It's very small, just starting out, but it's called The Monocle, which is an awesome name, by the way. Down. Yeah, they're really cool guys. They just started a podcast for the league. It's a very fantasy football origin story. And they asked me to come on, and I don't know how to say no. And I was like, sure. And the guy immediately called BS on my targets argument because of Juju Smith-Schuster. Because my whole argument to that is players, if we have some sort of history of them having an above average for their situation target share, that's the best indication. Not foolproof. Right. But it's the best indication. And the minute I started saying that, his bullshit meter went off. He's got a very strong bullshit meter, which I really appreciate in someone that's going to podcast, because way too many people are willing to nod along and say. And this guy immediately was like, "What about Juju Smith-Schuster?" I really appreciated it because that's the fly in the ointment. Before I even tell you what the ointment is, someone that does what Juju Smith-Schuster did, which has I think he had a 27% target share per game. And the year before Antonio Brown left, that's really high for a wide receiver 2 in his second year. That's why we love Juju Smith-Schuster. It failed, obviously, last year. But that's what you're looking for, a guy who has some sort of record of being above average in terms of being able to carve out this role between them. And that's why it's difficult, because you have to consider situation. Like, Robbie Anderson's, I think, a top 24 wide receiver, but he plays a position in a very different way to Juju or Landry or even DeAndre Hopkins. So what looks good for a Robbie Anderson type player is different. But you can adjust for that, right? You can see a Deshaun Jackson, and that guy is a Robbie Anderson type player, but earning a vast amount more target share than Robbie Anderson ever did, if I remember my history right. So you're looking for, considering their role, someone who's carving out more of the opportunity than you would expect for that role, even as a good player. And that, I think, is the best indication of someone that can be a Tyler Lockett. And then there are some players like Chris Godwin and Tyler Lockett where their college profile backs them up, which is the only way I really hit on them, to be honest with you. But sometimes that's not the case. Like, I'm trying to think of another one that did it. Everyone you mentioned had a good college profile, but there are some players, frankly, like Tyreek Hill. He's an efficiency player too, that did it without that college profile. So sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it doesn't work because Juju Smith-Schuster happens. But that's the best indicator I can find of someone who's more likely to do it.
Hey, you still got J-Mike backstage? Bring him back out front, will you?
Did he leave again? He just likes leaving me because he knows. Like, do you know how much it hurt? like this is mostly just a joke, but I seriously love everyone in this chat, especially J-Mike, because he's just so fun.
You know how cold and lonely,
and he just likes to deny me trades and leave my podcast,
listening to all the fun stuff while not being able to actually be heard. Are you officially the man, Peter? Are you the man? Is that how you're acting right? Are you Big Brother? Is that what this is? I'm just kidding.
He just took off. We kicked Peter out.
Yeah.
Well, I stopped talking because J Mike's complaining I'm dominating it, and silence. So I'm back. Yeah, I'm back, baby.
I'm not stepping on a vacated targets landmine. I'll tell you that, but I'm not going to face that kind of wrath.
Jake also left again, just to point that out. My two favorite guys just like to leave. Apart from Zach, you're my favorite guy. Apart from Spaceman, you're my favorite guy. And Eden, everyone's my favorite person. It's terrible.
I like wide receiver 37 with wide receiver 1 upside.
we should probably get to
a question I do have about vacated targets is am I over exaggerating its importance? Because I don't hear many people like Evan Silver, Rich Harbour. I've heard them, all the people that are a lot smarter than me, mention them, but they don't use them in that incorrect sense, in the idea you're going to get a 29% guy. But I think it's easy for a scrub like me, I did the first time I heard it, to make the logical misstep of attributing those targets to players that don't necessarily get that much volume because of the nature of who they are. I think it could be a common mistake for those of us who aren't, Evan Silver and Rich Harbour level genius. And that's why I'm on it.
That's why I asked you the question, is because I'm not. I'm a dummy. Like, full disclosure, I know it's hard to believe. We don't ever tout that, but like, these are the questions that I ask people like you, Peter, because and I have come around. I have not used the phrase vacated targets in 2 years, because when you first started talking about them, and it made a lot of sense to me that, oh, okay, we're looking at this wrong. It's not just targets that whoever the next receiver is going to step in and pick up. It's the level of receiver dictates the percentage of targets. So if you are a good receiver, you're going to come in and pick up those targets. If you're not, somebody better than you is, or that level is going to be
Davis.
And players have a wide range, right? Like, I do think, like, Sterling Shepard had a 23% target share per game last year. His highest before that was 21. So I'm not saying that they can't improve with a no Odell Beckham. Like, obviously, an Odell Beckham limits other people's ceilings, or a Julio Jones. I can accept that, but I don't think they can balloon up so far. They change. I'm not sure we can go that far. But I'm going to keep pushing harder, because when I find a fringe like this, I want to push as hard as I can until I get it wrong and then rail it back, and then I know where the edge is. So I'm going to keep pushing, and I need people to keep arguing back at me, which is why I appreciate Twitter the way I do, because everyone argues back at you and lets you know when you've hit that edge, right? So, that's what I'm doing with it. I'm not saying these players can't get a little more volume without that dominant player on the team. And oftentimes you get someone breaking. That's where breakouts come from. Because, again, passing attempts do kind of work this way. You can assume a team throws for a fairly similar amount of volume one year to the next. It's a little more accurate at the extremes if you use coaching history. But team by team is fine, too. It's I'm not going to go through my entire damn start of the article. Read the damn thing when I publish it. But it's fairly consistent in terms of the coefficient of variation. You get a little better at the extremes, but overall, team's fine. If all you have access to is teams, you're still getting a really reasonable representation of how often they're going to try and throw it, and their pass-run splits, interestingly. Now, something that goes along with my vacated targets argument, or my fringe vacated targets argument, is that position target share is much more volatile than team passing attempts or even something like run-pass split, which means it predicts about 27%, rough minus, depending on your sample, year over year. So that to me seems less of a coaching decision than run-pass and more of a team talent. And that's why someone like Hooper, who didn't move the needle too much but enough, is good, but someone like Mark Andrews, who drastically, well, to be fair, Baltimore's been targeting the tight end heavily for years, so that's not the best example, but he still moved it a little further on this extreme of tight end targets as well. So anyway, I've gone too far into it. I'm going to shut up. J-Mike, say something good. Or say something, because everything you say is good.
I just love how about 140 to 150 minutes in is when we had to get to the tight end talk. I just love that. That's how committed you are.
I told you it was coming.
Stay away from you slipped in Zach Ertz earlier.
Are Blake Jarwin and Mike Gesicki guys that we should be looking at in a different light moving into this next season?
A very dark light. Turn it down.
I was going to ask you. Let me flip that. So what light are they in now? And are we talking about like the ADP light that they're in? And then do you mean should we be looking at them as like top 12 guys? Is that what you mean?
Should we consider them top 12 tight ends at this point?
I think everybody after tight end 6 is a top 12.
Right? Basically.
That's the idea, but unfortunately numbers don't quite work that way. But no, I definitely do get what you're saying. Like, they're all the same. They all provide the same. But the roles, quote unquote, have changed. Blake Jarwin is a starter. He's a full-time starter now at tight end. In Miami, Mike Gesicki, he's essentially been – the coaches have said that he's the new slot receiver for that team. So should we start to value them as – legitimate fantasy starters going into the season? And I guess you can even throw OJ Howard in this if you want to talk about the whole Brady whatever connection, if that's where you want to go.
Well, I'm just curious. I'll just throw this out real quick and I'll get out. Blake Jarwin is the one outlier from the rest of that group from an ADP perspective. So I feel like a lot of people are liking Gesicki, who's tight end 12, March ADP. OJ Howard tight end 14. Blake Jarwin's all the way down at 26. Just to throw that out.
You and I are on exactly the same page because that's what you need to do with tight ends. If you don't have Travis Kelce, if you don't have Mark Andrews, if you don't have George Kittle, if you don't have one of those three, then go get Blake Jarwin, whose ADP is tight end 26. Like like that may not even be on ADP, like the page.
I didn't know we drafted that far.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And so like that was the thing is the tight ends. And I know I joked earlier about Havenhurst, but Havenhurst is like tight end 30 something at this point. Like, why not take a flyer on him? And if all of a sudden Atlanta continues to target the tight end, and that was the thing for Austin Hooper, the last 3 years, I've been making a living in tight end premium leagues with Austin Hooper because he had more receptions than all but 4 tight ends in the league. Even though he's not any great shakes, he caught a lot of balls. He was a big part of that offense. And so those are things that I look at where I like the cheap tight ends, and I like cheap tight ends that I think can get into that top tier.
I really think that's the way to play the position. You just look back a couple years, find the player that everyone loved before that now they don't love. That's another way of doing it. I used to do it by draft class. And has anyone forgotten about Jono Smith yet? It seems like he's a later tight end. There's still no reason to have faded yet. Adam Shaheen, there's a reason, not like he might be not worth a roster spot, but I still, if you're deep enough and desperate enough, I don't mind that as a deep name. But Jono Smith seems like one that people might be forgetting about a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and that to me, that's how you mine value in the tight end position, and also look and see who Cleveland and New England and Arizona and the Giants play, and when in doubt, you can stream one of them and hope for a touchdown. Like that's literally like.
Is Ricky Seals-Jones dead?
He just signed with the Chiefs today.
Kansas City Chiefs.
I'm sorry, I know
he did.
I am in a league where John Bosch just cut him.
Again. I don't want this again. I don't want any part of this in my life, but I'm back in, and I'm upset about it.
Talking about how to play the tight end position, I know, Peter, you were very high on Mike Gesicki, acquiring him before last season started, and looking at where these tight ends that were drafted the end of first round, everyone was telling you don't use a rookie pick, a rookie first round pick on tight end, because what happens is the Mike Gesicki's, they don't perform, and the time to acquire Mike Gesicki was last year. But now that he's seen the production boost and the value boost, you've seen Mike Gesicki's the tight end 12. I think J Mike said tight end 12. He's my 10 11 right now, but I'm not paying tight end 11 prices to get Gesicki right now because there's still a lot of volatility in how he's used. And so I would rather target a Blake Jarwin where like J Mike said, and for a very cheap price, and then watch that value spike. But
that's the other trick. Oh,
just
go ahead, Peter.
I'd like to point out, this is a slightly inebriated point, but Spaceman's newer than a lot of you guys who are well worn by podcasts. I want to point out he's putting out an awesome free database. He's putting out good content. He's got a great podcast with one of his buddies I enjoy listening to. But one of his things that he needs to learn is to speak on podcasts. I've heard him on several. And he's still in that polite phase where he's waiting for his moment to talk. He has smart things to say, but he doesn't know to just start talking when someone takes a breath. And he's coming along, man. I'm hoping my assholicness can wear off on you a little bit, because everything you say is good, man. You can't just speak. It's fine. Appreciated that. It's a really good point. And yeah, I would say about Mike Gesicki, we may have seen the biggest value jump we'll ever see. So if you're going to get a good offer on Mike Gesicki at this point, despite the fact I was saying target him last season, I'm okay with trading him at this point, but there still is upside yet to gain. But that's the way I play the position. Like if I can get that value jump, I'll cash out, and I'll look for the player the year before Mike Gesicki. But there still is a little upside there, I think, with him. Zach, sorry, man, I didn't mean to.
No. And the reason why, or at least I think the reason why, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, that you're on Mike Gesicki is the tight end position, especially when you're looking at players coming out of college. The top tier of the NFL tight end position is dominated by guys who are really, really athletic. If you look at Kittle popped. Kyle Lebrecht that I podcast with at K Lebrecht does the cheat sheet. George Kittle was nobody. Was not on any radars during that draft, except for on Kyle's cheat sheet. He was the number one athletic profile. I have George Kittle in every league that I'm in from that year because I was picking him up in the 4th, 5th round. And that's the thing. I mean, you look at the top of the tight end tier and you look at George Kittle. You look at Travis Kelce was a freak. You look at Mark Andrews. You look at Evan Ingram. Like that athleticism. Noah Fant is another one that came out last year that had that crazy, and Hawkinson, like all
who will be soon undervalued, I think.
Exactly. And those are the type of players that you're looking for that have that athletic profile. You don't necessarily want to draft them in the rookie draft if you're spending a 1st or a 2nd round pick, but if they're dropping, look at some of these guys with the athletic profile. Akwegbunam is going to be Alberto. Like if he drops in your draft to like the 3rd round, he is going to be an athletic freak. and has that profile to be a tight end in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, because tight ends take a little while to mature. It's a tough position. You're learning how to be a wide receiver and you're learning how to be an offensive lineman all at the same time, and you have to know everything that the quarterback knows.
In tight end premium leagues, I love to take my 4th round picks and spend them on like a Cahill Waring, who's for Houston. They have decent draft capital, decent athleticism, and if they don't hit in a year or two, okay, I can drop them. But that's right. Yeah. That's the thing you could do with George Kittle. You take a swing on him in a fourth round of a tight end premium league, and you see if they hit. And then if they don't, okay, no big deal.
When you're playing the tight end game, is it just all about athleticism? If you're going to be drafting guys in rookie drafts?
It is for me.
You don't get the Jason Wittens. You don't get some good tight ends that way, but an awful lot of them turn out that way. It kind of brings us back to the rookie class a little bit. I know everyone likes Albert O because no one can say his second name except for maybe Zach Dunn. Except for Zach Dunn, we're all lost.
We need a Dynasty Dummies speak like a show to teach us how to say that name.
Those are my kids. Like they know. I don't. I'm just like, here, watch some film. Tell me what this guy's name is.
Hey, everybody needs a Nigerian. That's all I have to say.
That is so true. And underrated in fantasy football that we should all go get those guys. Sorry, I'm actually trying to message Gabe to see if there's any chance we can get him in here tonight. Because since Jake seems to have left for good, I'm guessing. Then we have some space, but there are some good tight ends that don't come with a great athletic profile, and Jason Witten is a banner carrier of that group. But of either group, who do you see? Like this tight end class seems fairly meh, to be honest with you.
Yes,
Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool, right?
And
I was gonna say you take the shot on him in the what is it early third? Maybe you can get him. Maybe you have to fight for the late second, and you hope that he lands in a place where they leverage him in tight endy ways, and his athleticism is able to just really shine and be something that's special for an offense.
Yeah, you hope he Darren Wallers.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
To me, like the tight end that I like the best out of this class, aside from Okwebunam, is Bryson Hopkins. And I know I've heard a lot of people not like him, and that's fine. I actually saw somebody the other day tweet out that he doesn't block at all. And I was like, we're watching different things because I think he really I think he likes to block. I think that he likes to finish blocks. I think that if you give him an excuse to put you on your ass, he'll do it. And he's also really, really good at route running, which is, to me, in Dynasty fantasy football, you want the guys who can get out and catch the ball and score. And he's got a really, really good get off the line. So he's able to beat whoever is in coverage, usually a linebacker. He's got quick feet. He's got really good hands. And his transition from catching the ball to being a runner is really, really fast for a tight end. And so that's something that I look at. I mean, it's one of the things that and I hate to use O.J. Howard in the same name because O.J. Howard has kind of fallen on his face the last couple of years. But that was the ability with O.J. Howard that you saw was he could catch the ball and then tack on 15 yards after the catch. And I think Bryson Hopkins does the same thing.
I'm actually really glad that you brought up O.J. Howard because a lot of people, when they see a tight end that can't block, they automatically kind of disassociate themselves from that tight end. My whole spiel last year was Noah Fant is the rookie tight end 1 in this class. And he's the rookie tight end 1 in this class, not because he's the best tight end in this class, but because he's not as well-rounded as a guy like – I'm losing the name now.
Hawkinson.
Like Hawkinson from Detroit. And it kind of worked out that way. We just saw him get targeted consistently. We saw him on the field to get targeted. You know who else doesn't block? Mark Andrews doesn't block. He's one of the best tight ends in the league. Why? Because he's consistently targeted. And I think a lot of people think that with tight ends, if you don't block, you're not going to get on the field. And I just don't think that's the case at all. I'm personally looking for Mike Gesicki. I'm looking for somebody that is going to be a receiver first. And then maybe if he develops later on in his career as a blocker, we can talk about that at that point.
Well, and this goes back to a question I asked the other day to everybody, specifically targeting Peter and Dave, but I put it under the guise of all of my analysts, my metric friends, who use the numbers to predict things. And I asked the question, and I think that to your point, the idea that tight ends don't have to block is kind of a fairly new event in the NFL. Like, we've shifted to this move tight end. It was kind of the Aaron Hernandez role, and Jimmy Graham was that same kind of thing. And so it's been fairly recent that you have real move tight ends that don't have to block. My question was, how do you with the numbers, because you want a large sample size, but the NFL changes reasonably rapidly. I mean, it's not changing every year, but over the span of 4 or 5 years, you see this evolution. Now, all of a sudden, does blocking matter? And how do you account for these shifts in the NFL with the data? Because these changes don't happen over a period of 20 years. They happen over a period of 4 or maybe a little less, maybe a little more. And so, I mean, I think you're right with Fant. I think Fant is one of these players who can be productive in the current iteration of the NFL, but wouldn't have been productive 15 years ago because he would have been, he's not a blocker. He's not going to come out and hit you in the mouth, and so he's going to be on the bench.
Someone's asking about Tyler Eifert. If anyone's got any opinions, it's this Drake. Let's see if I can remember. PFSA on Twitter again. Asking about Tyler Eifert in Jacksonville. Also, just a quick note: the most athletic tight end, according to my combine model, according to my cheat sheet, man, is actually not Albert O. It's Cole Kmet. I guess it's Kmet.
Really?
Yeah.
I pronounce it Kmet.
By a very small margin, but
the T is silent.
Yeah. It's French.
Okay.
Oh, man. That's cool.
These guys could literally stomp us into the ground, but okay.
I mean, sure. At this point, again, with Tyler Eifert, I think he just goes in this bag with the rest of these guys with Jarwin. In that obviously, we've seen Eifert continually not be able to stay healthy, which is sad to say and see. However, at tight end 35, like, is he even being drafted in these mocks, right? So he's someone that's an afterthought. He's probably even on your waiver wire. So as cheap as he is to have, sure, go get him. He's 29, and I would imagine that at one point he met all of those thresholds that Peter talked about several weeks back on what you're looking for tight ends athletically. But we're a long way from that. So as long as you're not getting him, expecting him to be a contributor for your offense, great, or for your dynasty teams, great. Whatever he gives you is an absolute bonus, and be thankful that you threw out pennies to get someone like Eifert. And even another guy that's interesting that had talk about a fall from grace, even in the midst of the season. Like, we were waiting for Gerald Everett to really be something. Then this season he starts getting targets and his value kind of ascends in the midst of the season, and then he gets hurt, and then Higbee comes on, and all of a sudden now we look up and Gerald Everett is tight end 25 in ADP, absolutely forgotten about in the midst of an offense that now has a cantankerous Brandon Cooks ready to be traded out of LA. So I find Gerald Everett to be a guy too that it could be interesting. But from as far as the rookies go, I just ride with Zach on this one because I hadn't. That was the one group that I hadn't watched as deep. But also, show me something that you do that's special. Right? Can you show me one trait that's actually like elite from a fantasy perspective that will help me? And just like you said with Fant, with all these other athletic guys, give me something to lean on in the midst of being able to just get somewhat of targets on a team. And I think that we can ride with you.
With
no first round tight ends though. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
And with Tyler Eifert, the thing with him is that I saw when the signing went down, I was seeing a bunch of comments on Twitter about, Josh Oliver, this really hurts Josh Oliver. Because I know a lot of people are excited about Josh Oliver as a prospect. Is one of those late flyers that a lot of people took in tight end premium leagues. And I was just looking at Tyler Eifert's contract details. It was a 2-year deal, but there is a very generous out after this year. So this is another time where I'll do a very cheap offer to try to get Josh Oliver, stash him on some of my deeper rosters, because I think a thing that I like to take advantage of is knowing how contracts work. And people see that 2-year deal. Tyler Eifert, who had a very good, or like I think second most productive year of his career, I think was this year, like at least in like catches and stuff. But know that there's an out after 1 year, and if Josh Oliver shows anything to anybody, then it's something that I got it for a low price, and I can mine some value out of that.
Yeah, I would say playing tight end this way is difficult in terms of roster space. It starts to become valuable. Like, it's hard to roster 2 tight ends. It's really hard to roster 3, which is really what you're starting to look at doing if you're rostering an Eifert. Josh Oliver's a really good name, but at some point you just kind of got to call your shot and have one very low likely guy to be relevant behind. So
this is the year that I pick him up.
Plan to start.
Yeah, this is the year I pick him up, and then if he doesn't do anything this year, then it's okay, all right, then I can move on.
And the other part of that is your league size. So if you've got a roster that is not big enough to carry 3 tight ends, then neither does anybody else. And so there are going to be tight ends available on your waiver wire weekly. You can play it almost like redraft, where you can stream tight ends that way. And if your roster is larger and you can accommodate the extra tight ends, then go for it and play it that way. And you're basically playing your waiver wire streamer is coming from the back end of your roster.
I just mean the back end of the roster does get someone who plays tight end position this way exactly every year. Like, I'll be interested in these rookies in 2 years, for example.
Right.
It can get a bit of a roster crunch when you're trying to add Andy Isabella, and you're also trying to add, KJ Hamler from this class, and you're trying to find room between him and Josh Oliver. You kind of got to make some heartbreaking decisions, and it's really difficult at tight end where they're so less. Like, even if they got to be a streamer.
Well, but the other part of that is if you hit one of them, then you've got one. I mean, if you picked up Darren Waller last year as the tight end 36 in the preseason, and all of a sudden you think that he's going to be a top 12 tight end, you don't necessarily have to play that roulette anymore. 3 years ago, I had George Kittle, on the back end of my roster. Well, the rosters I have George Kittle, I don't have to deal with playing tight end roulette anymore because I have George Kittle. I mean, that's the other part of this.
It's just it's league dependent, obviously, but it's where you draw the line between taking shots at running back, wide receiver, and trying to grab that guy.
Yeah,
like that.
No, that's fair.
Different. Like, I don't know where to draw that line for anyone else. It kind of just depends on the team more than anything else. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I was just about to ask, in that once you do have one of those guys who ascend to that top 5 area, are you all clutching to those guys so tight, like my precious type deal? Or is it a case where you're looking to try to flip them for more value and play the game over again? I'm just curious, what is your all's typical approach, because you all play the positions that way? Because I know that some people are like, hey, I have a top 5 guy, I have a top 3 guy, I have Kittle. Like, you might as well try to prime for my cold dead hands. Like, it's like trying to take Tyler Boyd off of an Aton team. It's not happening, right? So then the question becomes, once you have one of those guys, do you guys try to cash out and play the game again, or you holding on tight?
In a league that we're actually that both,
I mostly hold them.
I was just saying, in a league with J Mike and with Zach, I think with I don't know if Jesse's still in the chat, but it's his league and Olympians. This is where I'm at with tight ends. I had George Kittle. I had Noah Fant that I actually just received in a trade. And then I also had Mark Andrews. And Jameis Winston, for some reason, was not signed by an NFL team. And it just ruined my plans this year to keep them forever. So I had to actually end up trading Mark Andrews. And first of all, I don't even know if I traded the right one between Mark Andrews and George Kittle. I think we should have that conversation too. But I had to trade Mark Andrews for a quarterback in that league. I had to get Carson Wentz. I ended up getting Carson Wentz and Leonard Fournette back, so I felt decent about it, but it still really, really hurt. And I think that's everything that you were saying, Jay Mike. I think because tight end is so unpredictable, and because after those top 5, after those top 6, it's a crapshoot. For me, once you have one of those guys, they're almost the most valuable thing possible, just because of the scarcity of tight ends that you can predict game over game, year over year.
So yeah, I agree with that. And then, Peter, if you want to jump in and talk about how you want to hold on to them, go ahead, and then I'll jump back in.
No, I was going to say I'm happy to hold, but if someone's going to come for an offer, this goes back to something I thought I was going to bring up earlier, and then we went off in a different direction. I think it was the Bills again, probably. But the top tight ends are often overvalued in terms of ADP and trade value. Like, obviously, getting one of these guys is such a big difference maker, as Zach said, but that's because of where we're trying to get them. And once they start flirting with top 3, top 4 round draft capital, if I can get that value, I'm mostly out.
Yeah, and that's where I am. I mean, like the league that you were talking about, Eitan, my tight ends, because I just punted the position and everyone laughed in the draft because I didn't take tight ends and people were taking it was tight end premium, and I ended up with Jared Cook, who was tight end 7. I ended up with Irv Smith and Jay Sternberger, who are 2 guys that in a couple of years I like their potential. And then I just picked up Donald Parham off the waivers because he's my guy. But I just had a DM the other day from Bobby Koch, and he was asking me about this is actually very scenario because he had an offer where he could get TJ Hawkinson and I think it was like the 1st or 2nd pick in a draft for Kelsey. And I was like, I don't see at that point why you wouldn't do that, because now all of a sudden, or at least have the thought where is Hawkinson and where Hawkinson can score as a tight end, plus that pick that could be a top quarterback or a top running back, is that in the aggregate gaining you more than having Travis Kelce? So is Travis Kelce giving you more over Hawkinson than whatever you're getting is giving you over your lowest player that you're starting on your team? And so that's how
it almost needs to be Travis Kelce plus the value of the roster spot. I think that's the thing that we're kind of talking about here.
Yeah.
The value of the roster spot when it comes to tight ends, when it comes to having to play the tight end game and rostering 3 or 4 just to be able to play the matchups, that's where the real value of whether or not trading this guy is worth it.
Well, and plus Travis Kelce is 3 or 4 points a week higher than whoever the next tight end is. I mean, like, Travis Kelce is an advantage. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, he is. But if all of a sudden Hawkinson is tight end 8 and you get Jonathan Taylor, is Jonathan Taylor more than 3 points higher than whoever the bottom starter on your roster is? That's kind of how that's how I look at it. Is yes, you're gaining positional advantages, but your overall makeup of your team, you don't score in the week with your positions. I mean, it's not like, all right, my tight end beat your tight end, so I'm good. It's that overall team scoring. So if you're ahead in the aggregate by trading Travis Kelce, that's still a win, even though you traded Travis Kelce.
Peter, you and I play in a 2 tight end format, one of the player profiler minion leagues.
Right.
And so that's when we talk about like a tight end premium in 2 tight end leagues, I will hold on to those elite players.
Yeah.
Because and Scott Fish talks about it all the time because he does a lot of work for the SFB about looking at tight end scoring. And if you can, I try to win through tight end positions in those 2 tight end leagues. So I'll have a Kittle and I'll have an Ertz, and that's what how I want to build my teams, because that's just a big advantage.
Philly Special, what's up, man? Glad to see you in chat again. He's over on Twitch as well. We normally meet each other on Twitch, actually. Why don't I have a mod? I do. It's Jesse Reeves. He can't even be bothered to get on this podcast, so I'm not surprised he's not modding the chat. I face it. Also, it was never a serious position, and I'm just trolling him. But there you go. Yeah, just who cares about tight end, man? We've already spent way too many words on it.
Yes.
I'd love to get back to the rookie wide receivers and stuff, or the rookie picks. That's
I would love to go back there. I also, just to put it in your bonnet, like, who is the running back or the running backs you're targeting right now? Mostly it's so running back season, as it always is, but especially right now, it's really hard to bet on running backs, but we don't know what the teams are going to do in the draft and stuff like that. So I want to know if there's anyone in particular that stands out in a era of the season where it's definitely should sell all running backs. Is there any you're actually trying to buy?
Ito Smith?
It's really different. Okay, just shoot it out.
I love Ito Smith. Yeah, so I mean, Devonta Freeman was cut. Todd Gurley's there, but Ito Smith's still going to be there. He still has 2 years left on that rookie deal. So I think 2 more years left, and he's really cheap. So I'll acquire Ito Smith all day long.
I'm going the opposite of that. I'll go get Gurley at running back 20 right now.
I'm trying to buy. Even the value for that is some of your rookie picks, and then you kind of want to see what happens in the it's really hard. And I don't know. I'd rather hang on to most of the capital you can spend to buy them right now with running back. It's just a really weird part of the season, and frankly, yeah, I'll take the 3rd round pick for Ito Smith. I'm pretty much. I don't think I was ever on that train. Gurley's a more interesting one, but
Justice Hill is the guy too that might be. But he's way down in terms of ADP, and I don't necessarily think that the Ravens are going to add somebody like a high profile back this year. They may, and if they do, then we're in trouble. But I think Justice Hill was a player that I liked enough last year. He's fairly insulated, and if there's an injury there in Baltimore, man, he's got potential to be the pass catcher out of that backfield, which that's really what I'm looking for.
Philly's actually mentioning too that have recently stuck out to me. Gyson Carrion, Eaton Turner as an injury guy. He's mentioned how Geis's injury has been handled really well. He's also really young. And Carrion, everyone hates Carrion in my small little bubble. Like they desperately want rid of him. I'm like, he's a top 24 running back. I mean, he's fine. So I'm really interested in those two. Like I said, Philly already mentioned them in the chat there. But yeah, if you want to bend it back around there to wide receivers before we should probably get out of here.
Justin Jackson too.
I'm happy to sit here all night, as you know, but I assume you guys want to go watch your wives do all the work again for a little while before you go to bed. I'm not sure.
I would just say one more name though is Justin Jackson with Melvin Gordon gone. Austin Eckler was re-signed. Justin Jackson is interested. I mean, and these guys they're pennies, so that's another player I'd just be interested for pennies.
For someone you're actually going to spend some capital on, I'm still okay with buying Leonard Fournette at cost. I just think that what we saw last year with Leonard Fournette and the fact that he was able to be as productive as he was without scoring those touchdowns just means he's probably going to have another good year for you. And then you can get out then. I'm not going to hold on to him for very long. I just think that, I mean, people are getting him at close to running back 2 prices, and I'm just not sure if that's what he is this season. If you're in a win now situation,
I don't think he's a running back 1 this year. I think he's right on that cusp because I think they add a player in, and I said this last year with Peter on a live show during the Scott Fishbowl draft or right before the Scott Fishbowl draft. I said this past year, Leonard Fournette, this is the year he's going to be a league winner. He's going to be a top 10 back. I think that Jacksonville drafts a receiving back this year, and all of a sudden you see that split closer to what he had with Yeldon a couple years ago.
I get that. I fully bake that in. I just think that any loss in targets that Leonard Fournette gets, he's going to make up in touchdowns because of the ridiculously low touchdown rate last year.
Yeah, and that's fair, but I still think it drops him down. I think that he's on that cusp. He's probably, for me, between running back 11 and 14, the scoring this year, and again, that's not bad. Like, I'm not saying don't go get Fournette, but I think he's just coming off a running back 5 or 6 season. Maybe people are coming off him, and you're going to get a value there, but it's not somebody I want to pay up for.
You've seen his peak, you think?
Yeah, I think so, and especially you're coming up on the end of his rookie deal. Then all of a sudden you're getting into that, holy cow, we're not paying running backs further. even if he does have another solid year, I think you're looking at a player that you're not going to be able to deal going forward. So, I mean, Fournette's fine. And maybe I'm a little biased towards Fournette anyway. Like, he's not the type of player that I tend to attach myself to.
I definitely think you're in the majority. I 100% think you're in the majority, which is why I'm targeting him, because I do think that that's how a lot of people feel about Leonard Fournette.
Swole Eaton has spoken.
I loved. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
Hell no, you speak.
No, there's one guy, and I don't know if you all heard about this or have done this, but John Bosch, a dear commissioner of mine, and someone that I just appreciate in this community quite a bit. One of the things that he revealed to a lot of people on Twitter was his process of forecasting value, and it was saying, hey, at this time next year, after next season, where do these guys land? It was an exercise that he put out that he did. And I actually made a copy of his Google Sheet and did the exact same thing. I wanted to be able to forecast, okay, where do I think someone's value can land next year in terms of tiering it out and just trying to get an idea as to, okay, this might be a great time to get some people, or this might be a great time to sell people when you look at everything on paper and kind of see how things shake out. One of the people, and he did something that I didn't think he would do. Zach Reed, you guys might have heard of him from the Dynasty Dummies, told me that this was going to happen. I didn't believe him. I was very confident it wouldn't happen. But someone like David Montgomery came in and got 242 carries, and
I mean, I was off by 8. Yes, I was off by 8.
Yeah. Hey, the vacated carries argument. So Jordan Howard leaves his 250. David Montgomery picks him up. He picked him right up. Anyway, I'm just messing with you, Peter. But David Montgomery, he's an intriguing piece to me because I'm curious what the Bears are going to do at running back, but then also, if he continues to be the guy that's going to be getting 240, 250 carries, all of a sudden we put a quarterback back there with him that is actually somewhat competent. So hopefully the idea is the offense can actually stay on schedule and actually get a schedule, maybe even for once. And right now, when we're looking at ADP, he's going at running back 23. But he's one of those guys that I think you could extract a lot of value out of, and I think that his best is to come, and you're not having to pay exorbitant prices to probably get him. So I think that David Montgomery is an interesting guy. Everybody hates Rojo, but me, Robbie Jeffries, and I think Tyler Gunther. So obviously Rojo at running back like 35.
It's a hell of a list.
Yes,
the arbitrage Darius Guice, basically.
I heard Nick Whalen be offended that you didn't include him from here.
Sorry, Nick Whalen. Yeah. Nick Whalen. Yeah, well, there's a handful of us that don't hate Rojo. So he and David Montgomery, I find them interesting from a value perspective in terms of the upside that they can give you above what they can perform above what their price is right now.
Allen Robinson for president, David Montgomery VP 2020. Let's go.
Chicago 2020.
Wait. I'm half in. I'm half in. Those Allen Robinson. The rest.
A-Rob for life. A-Rob for life.
Maybe I'm just too used to prospecting through talent, boys. But David Montgomery got the role. He got the ideal role we would hope for a running back to get, and kind of stuck with it. Emmanuel Sanders, I think. Hey, you had your turn to talk. Sanders, on the other hand, he got more of a role than the naysayers were expecting, less of a role than we thought he could possibly get. So I'd even see a little more upside in that because he did really well with that role. And Josh Jacobs, John McNamara from University of Analytics for Dynasty, one or the other. He pointed out that Josh Jacobs was more of a receiving back in college and more rushing back in the NFL. So if we could just merge them together, it's kind of an Aaron Jones type argument where he didn't receive much in his early years in the NFL and then still doesn't, but got a lot of touchdowns, I guess, last year. So maybe there's some upside there since we've seen all phases of the game from Josh Jacobs, and the Raiders were just obstinately not passing him the ball while saying they would. But again, David Montgomery had the role. If the team improves, then that's probably a better way to prospect running back. I think we're really stretching pretty hard to think the Bears are going to improve next year. But what do I know? I don't like the Bills. I mean, I'm an idiot. So we'll go over to Eaton now, who loves the Bills and has hitched his wagon to the Josh Allen trade.
Not even going to talk
To
about
explain
the Bills.
my Devin Montgomery.
Not hitching anything to Josh Allen. Not even going to go there. Not going to get drawn to that again. I completely agree with what you were saying about the guys that you should be targeting, because you should always be targeting young running backs. I think that's just the right thing to do in Dynasty. But I do believe that the difference between what you were saying and what J-Mac was saying was definitely a question of cost, because you're going to have to pay premium prices to acquire a Josh Jacobs right now. You're going to have to pay premium prices to acquire a Miles Sanders right now. People are down on David Montgomery, and I think that may be why it might be worth it at that point.
So a name that jumped. So what I'm here for you guys is that you need me to talk a little bit sexier names than Justin Jackson, Ito Smith. So
We have
I'm
you
going
here
to
for
try
the sex
this
appeal.
again.
It's about time you started. Oh man, bring on the
So
sex
I'm going
appeal.
to try to
there,
flex
Dave.
a little bit. And how about I'll do an attempt here. About Chris Carson, Rashad Penny. Chris Carson has an ADP of RB30 right now. And I think it's a lot of that is because people are playing doctor and they're guessing about his injury stats or his injury status. But RotoWorld had a post recently saying that he didn't have to have surgery and his leg wasn't fractured. So, and even if Seattle does draft another running back, Chris Carson's shown that he's been able to at least earn some respect from Pete Carroll and earn some carries. So I think that is some insulation for value if there's more competition for carries. So I like the idea of Chris Carson. I have him as like RB17 right now, whereas his ADP is at 30. So I think there's a lot of value to be had in Chris Carson.
Drake PSA on Twitter. Sorry, man, I keep forgetting that Twitter name, but he's got another good question for us. It's up on the screen. How about Sony Michel? I heard someone say, what if Bill Belichick just goes, screw it, we're just going to run the ball so that at least I know our team won't suck, and therefore no one will say it was all Tom Brady. And I kind of like that vindictive Bill Belichick argument, because if we know nothing about Bill Belichick, it is that he is vindictive. So, like, what if he just runs the ball and Sony Michel finally pays off on the top 12 projections? Some people were saying he could possibly have. Not me, obviously.
If he does that, then the team will suck.
It was me.
And I think that's the problem with that entire kind of line of thought. If he decides to give Sony Michel 300 carries, the Patriots will have a bottom 5 record in the National Football League. And I think that's the issue.
Tank for Trevor. It's part of the plan, Eitan.
If that's what they're going for, hey, if that's what they're going for, absolutely. I just don't think that's what Bill Belichick's going for.
I find a lot of these situations, and I'm not trying to necessarily spark another discussion, so I don't even know if I should say this, but I find a lot of these situations where the tandem running backs and these really murky situations will be really interesting to see how they're sorted out this season. And they're creating really great areas of value if you hit right. Like with so we have obviously these places where these running back tandems, if you will. So your Phillip Lindsay, Melvin Gordon, where you could place your bet based off of the cost right now is interesting. What you're doing with a guy you all mentioned earlier, Justice Hill, where you place your bet, and this Sony. What I think, and I'm still very much in the Damian Harris camp, but the Sony at RB39 and Damian Harris even later, like there are lots of places later in these RBs where we were talking about with tight ends, you can mine value here. And if you're able to hit, man, your ability to skyrocket. So I'm curious how all this shakes out with these rookie running backs, these murky situations with these tandem running backs, and how that spins forward in value. I find that to be so intriguing. Still, Peter, I can't get over it. It's the running backs that keep me calling. Yes, I love to build through the wide receivers, but just like we talked about previously, these running backs offer me so much interest in the mind of conversation and value.
No. It's a point that I think someone made on the Dynasty Nerd podcast, which is the weird thing about running backs is they always are kind of worth a roster spot because all they need to do is end up in that role for one game and their value is going to spike. And that's an interesting point in Dynasty. I do find myself casting further afield than usual. I'm not looking at last year's class. Kind of was expected, apart from maybe Darrell Henderson, and we mostly think that's for negative reasons. So I find myself looking further afield than usual, which is what landed me on Geis and Carry On, and Justin Jackson's a good name as well. Like I just find myself looking. I don't know what it is about last year's class, but I don't know.
They're not good. We knew, like,
yeah.
They were down class. Like we knew that going in. We looked at that class and said, "Oh, you know, in if that class and this 2020 class were in the same draft, I don't think you would get to a 2019 player until pick 8. Like there's not that. Maybe AJ Brown would have been up there at like 7, 6. I mean, AJ Brown 6, but that class just was not the same. It didn't have the real talent to it that we think of. And I had this argument the other day with Nick Whalen, because he was talking about how, people drafted running backs in this class and they thought that it was going to go up. And I said, well, yeah, but we drafted running backs in this class knowing that this class was down. And we've been talking about trading out of the 2019 class for 2 years. So if you still had a pick in the 2019 class that was in the top 5, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you hate running backs. I get it. It's fine.
No, give me Jonathan Taylor 101 in this class.
In Superflex.
No, I get it. No, I think I agree with most people, which is unfortunate. So let's move to another subject. I love KJ Hamler in this year's class at wide receiver to do an unnatural shift with the wide receiver. But Antonio Gordon-Gandy is someone I'm hearing a lot of hate from on the Pro Bowl senior tape, which I thought at the time he looked good at the Pro Bowl, but now I'm getting told he actually looked average, he looked normal, he looked bad. Who's your deep wide receiver in this year's class? And is this a running back or a wide receiver class, to go back to Zach's point on last year not being running back class? Is this a running back year or a wide receiver year? You kind of have to pick a lane.
We thought it was a wide receiver year, but didn't we just talk about Justin Jefferson potentially being wide receiver 2 in this class? Maybe having that top 12 upside, maybe being Jarvis Landry plus. He's the wide receiver 2 in this class. So, I mean, I think that tells you everything you need to know about the class as a whole, right?
Well, but I think you've got the potential there for Jefferson to be there. I think you've got the potential for Judy to be there. I think you've got the potential for Rager to be there. I think you've got again, this has been my whole kind of drumbeat with this class is it doesn't have the huge spike in top end talent,
but there's quantity.
The breadth of this class, the breadth of really good players in this class is exceptional.
Which is why you should be using
I believe the official Dynasty Crossroads word is girth. On the Crossroads, we call it girth.
Yeah, it's girthy.
Like
it's a girthy class. I forgot about that. Sorry.
It's the Eaton of draft classes. Swole, girthy.
It's swole, yeah.
Would you like to correct the record? Are you not in fact girthy, Eaton? No. No, he's going with it. He's happy with that description. So Eaton is happy with the description of girthy. I think we should just accept that.
You asked about a deeper. Now, we're going away from girthy. You asked about a deeper prospect. So I'm going to go. This is perfect because I didn't even segue this on purpose. But he's a Trojan. Michael Pittman is the deeper prospect that I've got that I really, really like.
Just a guy that can really go up and get it.
That's it.
Just a guy that can go
professional
up
radio
and get it wherever it is. Yeah.
Girthy, deep,
wherever
Trojan.
it is.
Sorry, what was that name again? Pittman?
Yeah. No, Michael Pittman, and he's again the type of receiver that I don't tend to gravitate towards because he's a bigger wide receiver who can post up, but I think he does a lot more than that. I think he can make plays, especially on slants, and use his physicality, and then make plays after the catch, which I really, really like. Again, as another player, and you're going to hear me harp on this, that attacks zones. And he not only attacks zones where they're vulnerable, which is what you have to do, is there are seams in zones. All zones are cheats. You're covering areas, and so you leave other areas open. He's good at finding those, but he's also good at using angles once he's got the ball to attack that zone after the catch. And so that's a player in this class that I did not expect to be excited about, that I really am.
We're getting more viewers the later we go. Is that not weird? Is that not say something about
It just means it's getting better and better. You know what they like? They like the girth. They're attracted to the girth and to the Trojan having that girth.
I will tune in when P.A. Howdy's on his 5th drink. Thank you very much. There's no point in listening to him on his 2nd. Go for the 5th. I like Pittman. I've argued with Travis May a little bit, who's got a very reasonable take, and I kind of reject reasonable takes just because I don't like reasonableness. But Travis May's pointed out that he did well in this situation. We couldn't have expected him to do much more. And so I say, well, we should have been able to expect him to do much more, actually. To me, unreasonable. He thrust in a difficult situation with a competitive team, but he didn't do too well against the average of wide receivers who do well in the NFL at the ages he played, but he did well enough, if I'm going to nod my hat to Travis May a little bit. And he's interesting. I think he's, I hate to say it, but I want to see where he lands before I make the final decision on him. But like KJ in his skill set and his undervaluedness, I think people are going to be higher on Pittman as a rule than Hamler and Gandy as well. And also I get to say Golden Gandy, which is just fun.
Lack of a pro day is going to keep KJ Hamler's value down. I think you're not going to see the athleticism pop off for KJ Hamler, and I think that will keep his value deflated for a little bit, at least until the draft, if he goes high in the draft.
I was talking
he has to look up to Philip Lindsay towers over him, that kind of thing.
I was talking to Scott Barrett about that actually just a few days ago for the Dynasty Diagnostic. I think the show even came out today. I don't do it. Snoppy does it. But basically, my question was, without pro days, without this extra information that these teams have on these prospects, should we start to look at draft capital a little bit different this year because of the lack of information that the teams are actually going to have to then evaluate these prospects? I mean, obviously, wide receivers in and of themselves, you probably don't even want to look at the combine all that much, but NFL teams do. Why do the fastest guys keep being drafted first?
And I want to let Dave and J Mike speak, because J Mike is just fun to listen to and says smart things, and so does Dave. But Dave wanted to talk about wide receivers specifically. But something I've been thinking about more and more lately is, what if 2020 doesn't happen? You want to start doing that before anyone else, and I think everyone's going to start doing it at the same time. So I'm kind of
this is my show.
Now's the time to do it. I think you should. I would sell picks. I would sell 2020 and 21st picks if I was going to sell anything, because I was worried about 2020 doesn't happen. And I think it's slightly opposite to what we'd think. We'd think sell all running backs, sell all wide receivers. I would go the opposite way. I would sell picks, like lost rookie and sophomore years and 2 years with not playing for some of these guys. I think they're going to be lost players. But that's slightly extreme, maybe for a lot of people. Like young guys, they'll be fine. But I really think that's what I would do if I was really expecting 2020 not to happen. But
Peter, you're reading my show sheet.
Sorry.
You're reading my show. I have a show that I was going to do before this show. That's the show sheet right here.
Sorry, dude.
No, it's okay.
Do you want to start laying out some better points on that? Or?
Yeah, you want to hit record? We can just record the dummy show right now and just go. No,
I'm ready. I'm here. I'm in the room. But yeah. Anyway, that's something I wanted to drop and see if anyone had any thoughts on, besides Zach, who's already planned out a show on it, I guess. But Dave, who was it you were thinking about a wide receiver?
I mean, there's a lot. there's 3 guys that I want to leave all my drafts with right now, or at least maybe 2 guys with the draft and 1 off the waiver wire after the draft as a rookie free agent. But Brian Edwards, I think he's going currently underrated. I know Zach's really high on him. I just really like Brian Edwards. Kind of does it all for me. He's got decent. He has everything as far as combined scrimmage, or like his scrimmage market share, his scrimmage yards per play, and he's okay in TDs, and he also shows a little bit of returns to go along with the age 17 breakout age. But then to follow up that, I really like to see. I'm going to steal J Mike's guy and Lynn Bowden. I am really trying to be ahead of the curve on him. He's got the dynamism in the return game with like over 80 career returns.
He led the SEC in rushing.
Yeah. That's just, it's exciting. I think that's something that can be exciting to have on your fantasy team. And then also like really late or off free agents, rookie free agents, Aaron Parker out of URI, his market share, his scrimmy or his yards per play and his touchdowns. And he has a little bit of returnability. And he has his age 18 breakout age. And he had another NFL talent in his cousin, Isaiah Coulter, also at URI. So it's not like he was just going up against, division, F non-college football or non-CF.
FBS.
Yeah,
FBS schools.
Yeah.
So FCS. Yeah.
That's the term. But yeah, so he had like decent competition while he was there, and he still was dominant. So Aaron Parker's a guy that I like too, even though he didn't have quite the athleticism I was hoping for.
That's a name I haven't heard. I'm actually really, really glad I'm on the show now.
Check out FS Spaceman on Twitter for his database and a lot of other prospects that you might not have heard of, frankly. J Mike, who you got?
I want to pivot from who I've got to I have my eye on what San Francisco is going to be doing at the wide receiver position, because of the fact that Emmanuel Sanders was brought in, was successful, and then left. We've got Dante Pettis, who was cast aside and who they were really hopeful for. And I'm curious if they try to basically fulfill in a rookie that it's something that they still don't have. And I try to think of what Dante Pettis' strengths were coming out. If I remember correctly, he was a A++ in the special teams game. And wasn't he also seen as a really good route runner? Was that his thing? Am I remembering that wrong? Was that Pettis' calling card?
You need a tape guy.
We need Jake.
Sorry.
Jake was the Pettis guy.
Pettis, so does Pete. So does Paris Campbell. Like, sorry.
So if they look for a guy who's A++ in special teams again, and who's a really good route runner, and they pass on Judy at 13, I'm really curious who they're going to be taking in these subsequent rounds. If it's a guy like Ayuk later, because I'm
going in the
for
third
Ayuk.
round, didn't you know?
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I literally just looked through a couple of mocks. I was trying to say, okay, is this deeper than I'm really thinking that it is, or no? And I didn't see him in the couple that I saw, but yeah, if he goes first round, then I guess throw out the window. But Dave knew he was going to cut me deep when he took Bowden, so it's Bowden, and it's Ayuk for me as the deeper guys in the wide receiver group. But specifically, I've got my eyes on San Francisco. What is San Francisco doing? I've got eyes on that.
I like Bowden. San Francisco is busy not making Deebo Samuels a top 12 wide receiver. So outside of that, I'm not sure.
How many listeners do we have right now?
12.
Oh, that's way too many. I can't drop this thing because no, I'm just kidding. So the deepest dive that I've got, and it probably won't come to fruition. This is and it's, again, this is close to home. But University of Maine has a receiver. He's not going to pop necessarily on you, but Ernest Edwards is absolutely fantastic. And I think he's one of these guys that is going to get hurt by not having a pro day, not having the ability to kind of showcase his talents. Because look, up here Orono is 2.5 hours north of where I am in Maine.
That's where my hometown is. I'm from Bangor, so
yeah. I'm from Lincoln originally, so like I'm even further north. But like now I live down in southern Maine, and so it's nowhere. You're not going to see Ernest Edwards talked about basically anywhere else. But man, he's a really, really the way he plays. No, I can't even do it. Like he's just so good. He's so good.
Do you have a date of birth on him? I really like to look at him. Do you have a date of birth?
I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can dig one up. At one point, I had everything to send to Peter to see if he'd put him in his database, and then I was like, when everything started going on where we weren't going to get combine scores and everything, I was like, nah, never mind. Don't worry about it. But I'll see if I can effort that for you.
I actually have a friend who's in the athletic department. I might call him.
You guys with your
so good,
sources and your secret players.
So good.
I'm still upset about Malcolm. I've forgotten his second name. That normally doesn't happen.
Malcolm Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. That's the guy that I always remember when we're talking about deep players. Like that guy actually showed out in the NFL for a little second and then got injured again. I was really upset about that.
Borderline Super Bowl MVP.
But what put him in my mind was Lynn Bowden. Actually, as J Mike said, that mock draft, that mock on mock we did that Jake set up.
Yep.
Lynn Bowden, I think, got drafted by the Patriots, and that's what that put me in mind of. Really
What's the news surrounding Laviska Shenault? A year ago, Laviska Shenault was in those top 3 to 5 wide receivers. Then he had a year where it's basically a disappearing act. Laviska Shenault, he's been hurt, obviously. Like, what do you feel about Shenault right now?
Just kicked him out.
Try it again, man. Laviska Shenault has a Kelvin Benjamin path to success, and it's just not something I'm interested in. It's my take. That's how he produced in college. He's humongous. I mean, he's an amazing physical specimen, but Cam Newton's injured, so I'm out.
He's to me, he's more athletic than Kelvin Benjamin ever was. Kelvin Benjamin was a tight end playing wide receiver, and Shenault to me is more of like a crossover running back. Wide receiver. He's very raw as a receiver, I think, but he has some of the best ball skills of anybody in the class. Like if you get him down the field beating a corner one-on-one, he's fantastic. He'll high point. He'll stack the defender, keep him behind. Like he does a lot of things well. But when you start asking him to run technical routes, I think it really breaks down, and he has trouble doing some of that. To me, I like a lot of what I see, but I think there is a lot of development that needs to happen, and the NFL is not a developmental league, and so that really scares me about Shenault.
Is it like a Jalen Hurd type of player?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Shenault was Colorado's short yardage back. Like, if they needed 3 yards, it was Shenault. Like, that was the thing. And if you put him against man coverage, he looks a little bit lost. He doesn't separate. He doesn't have the crispness of routes. But he also does some things that you really, really like, where, again, tracking the ball and going down the field, he's fantastic. He's pretty good against the underbelly of zones because he's such a dynamic runner in space. But you got to be in a position where a team, if he went to San Francisco, that might be ideal. I mean, you talk about Hurd there, but like that type of coach who is able to see the dynamism and put him in spots to succeed, that's exactly what Shenault is going to need.
So a wide receiver lacking significant wide receiver skills. That's what I'm.
Yeah, like he's an athlete playing wide receiver. Yes, fully agree.
Yeah, it's not going to be my guy. I mean, everything's cost. I'll take a 3rd, 4th round flyer on him if KJ Hamler is missing. But
I mean, for what it's worth, I got him at like 17 or so in a 1 quarterback rookie. In a 1 quarterback rookie draft.
That seems to be a really value. I mean, especially if you're playing Superflex leagues, it seems to be a really value spot.
Yeah,
people fall in love with that size, man. I just think there's always going to be someone willing to take him over me, but if not, that's fine too. Yeah. J. Mike, the quiet man, he's got the secrets. You secretly hold.
No, I don't. I just don't think we ever saw LaVisca healthy, and I graded him pretty low when I watched him because I didn't trust what I was seeing, and I don't guess that I saw what other people saw with how refined that people speak of him being to some degree. So I'm just not in, and I'm definitely not in on the price that he's going at this point. So hey, God bless him. I hope he does nothing but great things in the NFL, but he just will probably be on 0% of my teams because I don't trust what I saw.
Well, and that was the funny thing to me is you heard a lot of people talking about him as being one of the top receivers in this class. For 2 years, you've heard people talking. And I watched the film, and if there was a fourth down play where they needed to throw the ball, LaVisca Chenault was not one of the first two reads. That does not scream number one receiver in the class to me. Mm. If he's not the first or second option on a fourth down play, and this is like multiple times when they get to a point in a game where you've got to get the first down in order to continue the game, and the ball is not going to Chenault.
So is he Cordell Patterson?
That may be a pretty good yeah. But I think he's a little better as a receiver and maybe not quite as dynamic as a runner, more physical as a runner. But Patterson did some things.
Not as much of an athlete.
He was incredible with the ball.
Yep.
The QB play.
Cordell Patterson.
No, that's true. But the QB play in college, other than Alabama and LSU, was not very good. Like it really wasn't. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue. Yeah, I mean, just from I can't believe I even said that. Actually, I went totally.
I agree with you. Like Colorado's quarterback play was terrible.
He basically is going to get that QB drafted. What's his name? Steven Montez or something.
Yeah,
he's going to get him drafted.
I think it's just squinting way too hard. Like maybe Devy prospect guides were squinting way too hard at his measurables, which were always impressive, and he must have been impressive young, which is how his name got added to the conversation. And like you say, that might lead to draft capital. An athlete is an athlete at that size can have a role in the NFL, but he didn't do much to distance himself. Well,
and the other part about this whole process is you guys live in other places, so maybe you guys don't know about this, but in Maine they fish for alewives, which are like basically like anyway. So they have the way you fish for them is
you're gonna have to explain that.
Well, I mean, the way you fish for them is you have a series of nets that go smaller and smaller, and so eventually they end up in this pool with your net that you can pick up and you catch them, but they can't swim back through the smaller and smaller nets, and that's kind of how I view Devy, and then the rookie draft before the combine, the rookie draft prospecting before the draft, and then after the draft is you have this series of nets that keep getting progressively smaller, and the fish that swim through are the ones that you want to catch. And so now we're still at this process where we're weeding out some of these players that still look pretty good, but they're not going to be the final players that come through the net. And then even once we get past the draft, we're looking at these players thinking all of these players are going to hit. They're not. The historical trends are if you have a first round rookie pick and you're hitting on 50% of those, you're doing better than the average bear. Like
I think that's a good way of looking at it. They're running a gauntlet. Essentially, and the ones that get to the end are the most likely, but still, a lot of them are going to fail. And every now and again, one that hit one of those earlier nets or one of those early obstacles will hit. And maybe that's Chenault, and you like him because of his size, but you got to take him with that in mind at that kind of price, not a top first round pick, as he has to be if he goes in the first round of an NFL mock, for example, because that's just a different kettle of fish, to go back to your metaphor. Guys, I have to let you get out of here. Your wives are working way too hard as it is. I think I've taken up way too much of your time. I need you to get back and help them so that they don't kill you, and you can come on and talk to me on other podcasts. Does that sound pretty decent? Does anyone have any closing thoughts about anything we've talked about before I close it out?
I don't know, but I hit 3 hours again. This is back-to-back 3-hour shows, Peter.
Yeah, this is going to be a 3-hour podcast. I'm not editing this bitch. Maybe I'll edit out. Maybe I'll edit
no
out.
mini-sodes? No
I
mini-sodes?
don't know.
It needs to
Just
be
this one long Minnesota.
The name of the episode needs to be episode 100. I'm not editing this.
No, this is the Magnum Michael Pittman episode.
Yes, there we go.
Good.
A lot of girth on this. A lot of girth.
The girthiest of podcasts.
Yo,
It's all good.
this is the last thing. This is the last thing I do want to throw in. I'm in obviously the league we mentioned earlier, Olympians. I'm really sad to say that in that league I am sitting, and is a league with Aton and Zach both in it. In that league, I am sitting there with the 107 and the 108. So you know who I was targeting, obviously.
You know who's
however,
106?
problem being, someone on this show with me has a 106. So yeah, there goes my Justin Jefferson dreams.
Somebody buy Alvin Kamara, please.
Well, we know that Zach is now the Justin Jefferson truther. Oh,
that's the one. I'll fly that flag.
He loves him more than everyone else. He tried harder. He got him. He won him. It's fair and square. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on. Even Jake, and who left early several times and then finally never came back. Just have a life. And all of you guys, FS Spaceman, Eaton, J Mike, and Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I don't know why I always say that like it's your entire name. Zach Reed from the Dynasty
it is.
Dummies
That's actually,
podcast.
I had it legally changed 2 years ago.
Legally changed. You can find all their Twitter handles, and the podcasts are in the bio. I really like to appreciate that they came on and talked to me for 3 hours, because so few people would volunteer for that, let's face it. Love each of them. I really enjoyed that, especially fun for me to get to talk to Jake again. Really love that. And thanks to J Mike, he literally was managing our chat this entire time. I was not as the host, but J Mike has been very conscious to everyone and adding feedback while none of us paid any attention. So J Mike for doing that, among other things. So
now you know
thanks,
the secret
guys.
to why he's on all of the Dynasty Dummies pods.
I guess so.
Yeah, whenever I don't
really
host the
appreciate
show,
it.
I just call up J Mike and he does.
Okay. I'm trying to do
Peter,
that,
take
so
us
it's
out of
just
here.
not
Let's
working
go.
out
Come
for me.
on.
Thank you, Zach. No, I really appreciate anyone who has listened to the Crossroads over the last 100 episodes. It's a hell of a number to hit, even if I did speed up the process with a bunch of mini-sodes without really. It's been a hell of a ride. Most Jake's been gone for it, but I've really enjoyed the rest of it as well. So thanks to you next week on the Dynasty Crossroads with our 105th episode. Actually, I think this is on. But this one's going to release first and be a mock 100 episodes. So thanks again, guys, and I will talk to you next week. Bye. No one else want to say bye? Fine. We're just going to end it.